Welcome to the Iowa City School District Board meeting on Tuesday, November 14th, 2017. I'd like to thank those in the audience and those watching on TV for taking an interest in district business. My name is Lori Rotland, and I call this meeting to order. I'd like to start by introducing those at the table with me tonight. We have Superintendent Murley to my right. Then we've got Janet Godwin. We've got Phil Hemingway, Ruthina Malone, J.P. Clausen, Sean Eystone, and Paul Ressler. And then we have Board Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. Public is reminded if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form found at the table in the lobby and turn it in. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. The first item on our agenda tonight is the resignation of the position of Board President Ruthina Malone. Did you want to say anything? No. Okay. Second item on our agenda is to elect Board President. As Vice President of the Board of Education, I will preside over the election of Board President. We will now vote on the office of President. Please remember, nominations are not motions, so no second is required for a director to be nominated. If you are nominated to an office, please verbally respond if you are willing to accept that nomination. It would be appropriate at the time a director makes a nomination, and it is verbally accepted for that director who makes the nomination to provide affirmative comments on why the nomination is being made. It is also not required. It would be inappropriate for other directors or the board as a whole to discuss or debate the merits of directors who have been placed in nomination. This is what the vote is for. The floor is now open to receive nominations for the office of Board of Education President.
I will nominate Lori Rotland. I've served with Lori for 2 years, and she's been extremely fair and balanced of temperament, and I feel that she would be phenomenal in that position and has the internal knowledge of the district and those things, and I think it'd be extremely beneficial for someone who has experience to be in that position.
Thank you, Phil, and I'm going to decline that nomination.
I nominate Paul Ressler for president.
I accept the nomination.
I'll nominate Janet Godwin for president.
I'll accept.
The floor is closed for nominations. We have in nomination Paul Ressler and Janet Godwin. Please, we will proceed with the vote. You will receive a yellow ballot. Please write in the name of the individual you are casting your vote for the office of Board of Education President. Kim will pick up your ballot. All right, we have Ruthina Malone voting for Paul Ressler, J.P. Clausen voting for Janet Godwin, Paul Ressler voting for Paul Ressler, Sean Eystone voting for Paul Ressler, Lori Rotland voting for Janet Godwin, Janet Godwin voting for Janet Godwin, and Phil Hemingway voting for Janet Godwin. Director Godwin has been duly elected to the office of Board of Education President. I will now administer the oath of office upon the president. Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Iowa, and that you will faithfully and impartially, to the best of your ability, discharge the duties of the school board president in the Iowa City Community School District, Iowa City, Iowa, as now or hereafter required by law?
I do.
We'll take a few moments here to shuffle a bit, and then we'll go with the rest of our agenda.
Okay, I think we'll move on to the agenda. Thank you, Ruthina, for your service the last few board meetings. With that, we will move into our student representative updates, and I think we'll hear from West High first. Zita Mackey, Ala Ali. No? How about Tate High? No, I think we got that they're not available tonight. How about City High? Tegan Roeder and Patrick McMillan.
Hello. How are you all doing tonight? I'm doing very well tonight myself. So for my report, Charlotte's Web was a very successful play. It raised money to go towards hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. I am pleased as well to report that the Student Senate as well has donated $1,000 to Puerto Rico relief. So City High is donating a lot of money towards humanitarian relief. Hear My Voice had its first recital. Happy to report that it included new students into the performing arts. Can Drive, which has been magnificently led by Patrick McMillan, my wonderful vice president, has been raking in plenty of cans and various other food items for donation later this month. And finally, the Little Hawk, the student newspaper at City High, has earned top news team at the Iowa High School Press Association, I believe 2 weeks ago. And finally, our ACE construction class building class has an elaborate storage shed that can be seen from First Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And from Liberty High, Shane Snap.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good.
Cool. All right, Liberty had its first two productions this October, comedies Superhero and The Internet is a Distraction, very positively received by those in attendance. Liberty's fall athletic season was highlighted by a pair of two state qualifiers, Camille Mack and Peter Woodward, both finished top 20 in the state meet at Fort Dodge. Liberty's dance team was also 2017's Iowa Spirit Squad Grand Champions at an event held at Carver Hawkeye Arena in October. We held our first homecoming dance on the October 20th, where 500 students attended, and fun was had by all. The highlight was our first two King and Queen, Jonathan McCullum and Abby Henderson. Transportation was provided for students in Kirkwood attendance for homecoming, for both there and back. And then teaching staff also gave their time on Wednesday, November 1st and the 8th for over 100 students who needed help with final exams and just to study. So that was it.
Great, thank you so much. Next up, we have the update from ICEA. Brady.
President Godwin, congratulations, and board members, thank you. I think that sort of maybe illustrates just the work that all of you put in. So thank you once again from ICEA for everything you're doing for the students in our district, and thank you, outgoing President Malone, for the service that you had in that position. Just one quick thing. I know it's on our agenda later on. I'd like to thank Assistant Superintendent Jane Fry for her work on the substitute issue. We've been actively involved in that. That's something that has a high level of concern amongst our staff, and so we're working and I'm not to steal thunder from the report, but on some things that I think are going to help with that situation. So we always appreciate having that level of collaboration on something that's really important to us. And I'd just like to give a shout out to my colleagues tomorrow for our elementary, buildings as parent-teacher conferences, family conferences. There's a massive amount of work that goes into making that a successful, meaningful experience for our families. And so I know my colleagues at the elementary level are swamped right now. And for the secondary staff and teachers, you're closing out a trimester, trying to get all your grades done by Friday, and then opening up on Thursday with a whole new brand of group of kids and maybe some new classes. So I'm assuming they're maybe not watching, they're probably grading, but if any of the teachers are watching, just thank you for all that you do. So thanks.
Thank you so much.
Brady, before you sit down, just congratulations to your co-president as well for his award.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pass that along. I appreciate that. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. So we'll move to community comment. Thank you for your interest in Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you would like to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. The initial community comment period shall be limited to 1 hour. Remaining community comment, to the extent necessary, shall take place at the end of the meeting. To the extent you are commenting on items not on our posted agenda, the board may ask follow-up questions of speakers, but it is prohibited by the Iowa Open Meetings Law from responding to questions from speakers or from engaging in substantive discussions regarding non-agenda items. First up, we have Julie Van Dyke. Oh, I'm sorry.
We have a student.
Pardon the protocol issues. Student
Yep.
Saad. Thank you. Students Against Hate and Discrimination. Miriam Luan Wala Safaya. I apologize if I mispronounce names.
Hello everyone, my name is Mariam Keita. I'm a sophomore at Iowa City High School, and I am here as well as my peers representing the Students Against Hate and Discrimination. As you may remember, the Students Against Hate and Discrimination was a student-led, student-formed group that started last November here within our district with the goal of improving the district for students. Last November, we presented a list of 8 demands to the former school board, and we are here with the intention of giving a 1-year update or follow-up with where we think we are in standing with those demands. I'm going to read them back to you now. They read as follows. 1, clear support from faculty and administration must be shown, and a statement must be made against bullying and harassment. 2, teachers and administration must enact the provided procedure when an incident has occurred. 3, education about the rights of students and the procedures to ensure rights. 4, there must be student-led workshops and trainings about diversity. 5, available mental health counseling and staff must be prioritized. 6, education for students about our rights. 7, diversity classes should be added as a required course for graduation for all students. 8, devoted mental health specialists must be made readily available to students. The condition that students should be included as a part of the reconstruction was also included within our demands. And so far of these, we would say that only 1, the first one, clear support from faculty and staff, and possibly, I would say 6 has partially been met. So obviously we've had a year to work on these, to develop these, and the results have been underwhelming, and we're fairly disappointed. For number 2, teachers and administration must enact the provided procedure. That has definitely not been sufficiently met. Soon after presenting these demands last year, racial epithets were found written on bathroom walls at West High, and when members of our group reported these findings to school staff, rather than working to find out who had written them or even providing some comfort to the people that found them, These people were told not to tell anyone during the investigation that eventually led nowhere. That is definitely not what should have happened, and it's crushing to think about it. 3, education about the rights of students and the procedures to ensure rights. Once again, that right there is an example of how that demand has not been met. We're still hearing the same things that we were hearing a year ago. And students don't know who to go to when something happens, or if they do go to someone, nothing happens. That's what this group was formed to accomplish, to stop incidents like this from occurring. We'll be talking more today about some of the other demands that we feel have not been sufficiently met, and I invite you to just open your ears and listen. Consider them closely. Thank you.
Miriam, can I ask you, would you email those to the new board?
Yes, I can.
And I'll just remind you all you could each speak for 4 minutes if you wanted to, and really let us have it up here, so don't forget that piece. All right.
My name is pronounced Lujane Hamad. On April 18th, we touched base and met with the former school board members on the implementation of cultural and ethnic studies within our district. We were shown a template with 4 different options: a new required class, a new elective class, incorporation of global studies curriculum into existing classes, or a new global studies certificate program. We were shocked to hear that infusion of global studies material would be a new concept, since our assumption was that accurate scholarship would already include that. At the conclusion of the meeting, we understood that the board agreed on having a trimester-long class, even in the form of an optional elective, to address Demand 7. We compromised on our proposal for the required class due to the urgency and necessity of moving the class forward. We left with the understanding that they were developing the course that we worked so hard for. We did not realize that they pushed us aside until I emailed Diane Schumacher on the process of the course. After this prompting, I heard back from her on August 30th. I was told that the board members, and I quote, favored the infusion of specific ethnic studies units into 8th and 9th grade American studies. We were angry and hurt. Yet again, the compromise we had reached has led to no conclusion. Since then, students held several meetings to craft our concerns clearly and concisely. The reason we had supported a trimester course was because it was the minimum time required to have meaningful discussions. A trimester was adequate time to dive into the information that needed to be covered deeply. We were not part of the favored decision by the school board, even though we explicitly requested to be a part of the reconstruction. This decision was made without us, and we were not notified of it until I reached out. We do not feel that infusion addresses our concerns because some students do not take 9th grade American Studies and instead take other social studies classes. Students who do not take American Studies also need and deserve to have this course available for them to take. Furthermore, if we are not infusing ethnic studies units right now, what are we doing? Is this information not being infused into these classes already? Are we not actively teaching our kids where they came from? Students are taught that they came from slavery far before they came from great civilizations. Not teaching important information like this will lead to forgetting, and forgetting will lead to erasing, and we cannot erase this history. It needs to be taught, and it needs to be remembered. Infusion is what is supposed to be happening right now, and it is not enough. We need a class dedicated solely for this important topic of racial justice. You know, to me, it's almost as if you want us to stay uneducated on our history. You want to keep us quiet, keep the district out of the news. You want to shove us under the rug with your infusion. You must know this history is not being taught already to suggest infusion in the first place. And we have been quiet, and some of us are quiet, until we refuse to stand down, until we have to start assimilating, talking like we are conscious, walking like we learned to run for president. Now we have been protesting like we are here for a reason, and nobody can take that away. You cannot quiet us down, you cannot ignore us, you cannot hide behind your desks any longer. We are concrete, we are mortar, we are bold, we are strength. We will raise our voices until everybody knows our mission and knows your action, or actually lack of action, in this mission. So we will not be ignored, fooled, or robbed any longer. We will remember and demand you do the same. We will not apologize.
Hi, my name is Wala Siddiq, and I go to West High, and I'm just going to be talking about why we should have this trimester-long course instead of infusion. So, a trimester-long course focusing solely on this topic is critical. A course like this would devote undivided time to achieving an in-depth and holistic understanding of the issues, experiences, history, and lives of concerning minorities in America. Having this course that's dedicated to racial and ethnic studies would be net beneficial for students within the district. This isn't a class that is only beneficial to students of color, rather everyone can take something away from it. First of all, we need to educate other people, just people in general, on other backgrounds and cultures. City High alums Laura Cornell and Nova Maurice made a podcast this summer concerning race, in our district entitled Mirrors and Windows. The podcast deals with topics like disproportionality in discipline policies and the lack of diversity in the faculty here in the ICCSD. While having teachers and faculty share our experience and share our backgrounds and reflect our experiences is certainly important, we need to be able to see ourselves in the coursework that they are teaching too. I need to know that the history of my ancestors goes beyond the middle passage and the last hired, first fired. I need to know that Rosa Parks, Gandhi, and MLK were not the only people of color to have ever made an impact. I need to know about the history of my people. That being said, I, as a student, have a right to know how the errors of the past have shaped the present. I also want to learn about why the world is the way it is today. Despite the fact that we are lucky enough to live in such a progressive town, we have the right to know that we too are flawed. Students should be educated on how minorities are systematically disadvantaged politically, economically, and socially. It is essential for students to learn about the history of America beyond the civil rights movement because we know racism didn't end in the 60s or even 2008 with the election of Obama. And next, a study proves that once people are aware of their biases, they are less likely to act out of ignorance. And this class would make people conscious of their biases, and thus decreasing the amount of bigotry in West High and all the schools. So this class would help us be aware of our biases and actually decrease all this racism happening and hatred. And lastly, I graduate in 6 months. For 1 year, we have been pleading for a class that teaches us about our heritage, our history, our people. It has been a year now since we first presented you with this demand. We graduate in 6 months and nothing has been delivered at all. We demand that we have a trimester-long course minimum in order to learn about our history. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophia Siddig. I'm a senior at West, and I'm just concluding this. On several occasions, district representatives have evaded discussions with SOD members stating that they simply could not find the time in their busy schedules. This time, we have decided to come back to you. The reality is that if students of color in this district, if their time, thoughts, feelings, and lives really mattered, as we have been told time and time again, they do. These sentiments would be reflected in your actions. We are sick and tired of putting effort, time, and hard work into these meetings, planning out what we're going to say, only to invest our futures in people that consider us to be a mere nuisance. We have sat with you face to face and told you our stories, and despite insisting that you were listening, we are still not being heard. We proposed our demands 1 year ago. 1 year ago. Only 2 of the 8 demands have been feasibly implemented. We, the students, have seen and experienced little change. We hope that the new school board members are willing to work with us and truly act upon our concerns. But if the only way to capture attention, time, and effort is to mobilize, then we will gladly do it again, if only to prove that we are still here. We don't need your nods and smiles from you. We need action. We deserve action, and we will not stop until we receive it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Luma McCowie, and I go to West High. I'm a sophomore currently. And we just hope you consider everything we've said and get back to us with any questions or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. That was inspiring. We'll move next to Julie Van Dyke. And after Julie, we have Stephanie Van Housen.
With all due respect to their specific issues, this is exactly what happens with all of these types of issues at this school district. This is what many of the special ed parents have experienced. We get lots of promises, nothing comes through. I'm extremely disappointed in the information that Mr. Murley released to the Press Citizen last week that showed the numbers of temporary seclusion rooms. And I would suggest to you that magical numbers and alternative facts are not what we're looking for. Those numbers don't add up. In the list, it shows 1 room retired at Horn since, what was it? It wasn't clear, actually. It didn't have a number next to it. It said room was retired or repurposed at Horn, and yet it shows 2 active rooms in that school. How many special ed classes are in that school? 2. How do you get 3 rooms out of that? You don't. If you move a room with a temporary seclusion room in it to another room, you didn't retire a room, you just moved the damn room. The rest of the numbers are just as fishy. Somebody needs to actually ask which month and date each one of those rooms was repurposed, and which date and month any new ones were built. Counting 2 at Longfellow when it's not even a currently existing school, that's not retiring rooms. This is more magical numbers. It's like when they tried to close Hills and make it look like the most expensive school by including the square footage and the costs of running the before and after school program at the preschool, but they didn't count the kids in their per child cost counts, okay? These numbers need to be explained. And after the Gazette paid $800 for information on this district's rooms, and after all the coverage, we're up to 250 million views of that HuffPost video of our lovely seclusion boxes now, and we still can't get an accurate list of how many boxes we have and where they are that are all counted by the same definition in the same way. This isn't working. My son at Northwest Junior High, the district still has not provided any documentation on what's going on in that room. They understaffed the room. They removed a nearly full-time social worker out of that room and said that the Grant Wood AEA social worker in the school, who already has a full plate, is now taking over all of that. Really, like she had enough on her, enough free time to take a 70% to 100% job in that room. That room needs to be staffed with a social worker, just like it was before. I hear they're hiring. It'd be really nice to know what's going on. The district tells us nothing. The special ed presentation the other night was shameful. We spent a good 5 to 10 minutes standing there with her, looking up at the screen where she posted all the nice things former coworkers had said about her, but we didn't have her finish her speech until the second hand clicked 7:30, and she didn't answer a single question of all of the pre-vetted questions, none of which were mine, to any of the people. We don't get information here. We want information. We want accurate information. We want it publicly posted. And when we're hearing that you've eliminated 7 seclusion rooms, I'd like to know which ones those are, where they were, and what the status of their removal was. Because you can't count a room that you just moved. There's no net loss there, okay? That's not real. We all know that's not real. I'd also like to complain about the lack of transparency when I hear a seated board president on the microphone in a meeting say that she has to end a meeting at 10 o'clock, and then I see 3 of you board members walk into a bar right on the heels of Brian Kirschling. I have license plate numbers of the rest of the people that were there. If you weren't talking about the school board meeting after, 6 hours of sitting here? It may not be a quorum unless Sean was there, which I hope you weren't. But it certainly isn't transparent, and it's definitely not what we're looking for. Shadow board needs to stop. Do your business in public.
Thank you, Julie. Up is Stephanie Van Housen.
My name is Stephanie Van Hoosen, like Susan, and I have a couple things I'd like to talk to you about after I thank you for your service tonight. I know this job isn't easy. But you don't always know about everything that's going on with our district. I don't think anybody does. Transparency has been kind of a topic tonight. And if I ask y'all for 5 PDFs that don't need to be redacted, 5 PDFs, end-of-year reports that were submitted to the government that don't need to be redacted, that would have the boring data about the PBIS implementation program and our bullying program here in our district, and you told me it was going to take 3 hours to send me 5 PDFs of a $5 million grant, of a summary report that you sent in, I would think you were trying to not be very transparent. You were trying to drain my pocketbook. I do not think it takes 3 hours at $25 an hour to send me 5 PDFs that you know you darn well have, and probably board members have them in their files. The second issue I would like to talk to you about has to do with redress of grievances, and this is something y'all are responsible for, and it partially has to do with your decision about the attorney that you paid over $35,000 for to make sure that I would not remain at the district. There are several ways in our district that an attorney like me, or an attorney, I wish I was an attorney, an employee like me can ask for redress of grievances. And there's about 4 ways for non-union employees, which I wasn't. There's Appendix 4, Code 443. And Attorney Holland told the former board that you can't use that. It was never finished. They never filled in the words. They just wrote, we're going to redress grievances for this class of employee. And since that time, a year ago, the board hasn't addressed that. They haven't filled it in, and that's on the board. And that's on the superintendent to make recommendations, but y'all haven't done that. So any employee in the grants group that is not covered by union contract doesn't have grievance, according to Attorney Holland. What y'all decided to listen to him rather than fix it and make there be a redress of grievances. So that's Appendix 4, Code 443. So then there's Appendix 6, but that can only be used by non-employees. And the Center for Worker Justice asked to use that. They filed an Appendix 6. They had people from the community that wanted to tell the board things. And I couldn't file an Appendix 6. But they did, and they wanted the board to know these things and to hear them. And the board did not hear them. That is blocking their voice. And that was on the advice of Attorney Holland. Okay, so then there's the bullying and harassment complaint form an employee like me could use. Seems to be a logical one. Everything's listed out that you do. I turned one of these in against Superintendent Murley on April 6th. I was placed on leave the very next day. Then, 13 days later, the equity director gave it to Attorney Holland. And it did not come out to be looked at. Now, the policy said it was supposed to go to the assistant superintendent. Attendants. It didn't. It went to Attorney Holland, and he kept that until a month after I received my letter saying my contract wasn't being renewed. Those are things that the attorney is doing to block my civil rights. What's my time?
You're just finished up. Thank you,
Dang.
Stephanie.
I'll send you this in writing.
Please. And on the grievance, if I'm writing that down right, it's 443. Is 443 in parentheses?
It's, yes, code number 443.
Thank you. That closes the portion of our meeting on community comment. We'll move on to our consent agenda. We have 9 consent items, 8, excuse me, in front of us this evening.
I'd like to pull 6, 7, and 8.
We'll be pulling consent items 6, 7, and 8. We need to have a report on the bills, and I understand, Phil, that you have that.
We had $2.8 million worth of accounts payable this pay period, $260,629.08 went toward the GO bond. We had a supposed final payment to the Comas Lucina on the project up at North Liberty at Penn. And I still have concerns about that spending there. I think we need an accounting of that, and some other things in there, but everything seems to be in order.
Okay, thank you, Phil.
So I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda, less items 6, 7, and 8.
Second.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll move into the board work section. We have the director liaison reports. Are there any comments that directors would like to make about their activities in the community this last time period?
The only thing I'll say is I apologize for getting it in late, but I thank Kim for helping me get it in there. And there is a the PowerPoint presentation that Paul and Janet and I received that Alexander is in there. I don't know, the format may not be the easiest to navigate, but it has the information in there.
I would just add that some of the feedback from the community on the listening posts at both Twain and Alexander was very positive, and that I think the schools really appreciated the visits, and I think it might be something that we can do to reach out to other schools in the district to see if they would appreciate a visit as well. So I thought I learned a lot at the one that I went to at Alexander, and it was a very good experience, very open, honest, a lot of good feedback. Other comments? If not, we can give a quick update on the October 24th board work session. We spent time at the end of the last board meeting talking about the accelerated facilities master plan. We had some information presented from the district. We asked a number of questions. There's actually an item on the agenda tonight to continue the conversation. Any other comments or feedback from board members on that work session? If not, the Policy and Governance Committee update. Paul, do you have an update there?
Yep, we met last Wednesday. Decided we set our schedule, so we have the first Tuesday of every month will be our policy and governance meetings. We started going through our list of policies that we need to cover this year. The ENDS policies was the first thing, and since we updated those last April, there was no change that was needed there. Appendix 7 will come before you guys hopefully next board meeting to be approved, and that is the new school naming policy on there. We're also going to, at the next meeting, continue our conversation about fraternization and conflict of interest. We're going to bring in a few more groups to discuss that with the ICAA and others, so that we can make sure everyone is covered under that. And we're also in future looking at seclusion and restraint policy updates. So our next meeting will be the first Tuesday in December.
Thank you. The next item is legal services review process update. I have not been part of those conversations. I don't know if there's an update that we can provide.
Yeah. Okay. So we discussed this at our work session on our board retreat on October 9th, as was previously reported at a prior board meeting. Since that time, we've been advised by Steve that there's an attorney that works for Eilers law firm in Des Moines that can provide us with some guidance on legal counsel review, and we've been asked by Joe Holland to please place that on an agenda as soon as possible. We hope to get that on one of our board work sessions very soon.
And did we get a contact for that counsel, Steve?
Actually, after working with them, they referred me to the Iowa Association of School Boards, who is the umbrella organization that serves as the conduit for the Iowa School Attorneys group that meets. And so I have been in contact with them. I've got a list of questions that were provided by the board. I forwarded it to them, and hopefully we will get some information back that I can pass on directly to you in advance of the next work session.
Okay, so when we want to have a question, we have to go to you, and then you go to them, and that comes back to us. We can't go to them directly?
You can definitely go to them directly. I went to them with on the recommendation of the board the last time.
Okay, so can you provide us with what
Certainly.
Contacts, information,
Certainly.
everything that way? I would just want to say, too, on this one that I hope that when we get into this discussion that everyone discloses their contacts with legal counsel and everything at that time, if they've had any meetings.
Okay. Any other updates on that item? If not, we can move to the teaching and learning portion, and the first item is program of study.
I'll just share a little information about that. Last year, we had the opportunity to take the two programs of study from Weston and City High and create one comprehensive program of study for the 3 high schools now that we're operating under. This fall, we did the same with the junior highs, so we have now one program of study for the 3 junior highs as well. And I included a link to those drafts for you in the course changes document that I provided. Really, the only new courses that we are proposing at this time would be 2 new courses for the advanced Placement Capstone Program, which is really an exciting program that City High applied to last summer, and they found out after the program of studies was approved last fall that they were accepted as a school that could offer these two courses. So they are offering the AP Capstone, help me out, seminar this year. I have Allie Borger German here, and she's one of the teachers of the program, so she can answer more questions if you're interested in that. So they're offering seminar this year, and then would be offering AP Capstone Research next year, and then a student who takes those as well as a certain number of AP courses can actually graduate with an AP Capstone diploma. So that's exciting, and if I'm not mistaken, I think we might be the first high school in Iowa to offer that. Okay, well, then I am mistaken. All right, sorry about that. And then West High has just applied for that as well this summer. So they're waiting to see if they're accepted into that, and then they would be able to offer that as well next year. So we have those two courses, and then we also have the Hear My Voice. I noticed that the student from City High was referring to that program, and that's a course that we are kind of working on as a pilot this year, but had a lot of student interest in it, so they're offering it as just one more opportunity for students to engage in the arts for kids who maybe didn't want to be in the full choir program, but wanted an opportunity to be able to participate that way. And then West High is offering, again this year as kind of a pilot, a peer assistance and leadership program. So they have students who are really becoming engaged and being able to provide leadership not only for kids in their building, but for students in some of the surrounding elementaries as well. So just a few more courses to add to our program of studies.
On the construction technology curriculum, I know I had received some interest from John Bacon on expanding the home building program, bringing the homes building program back. Is this anything that's on your radar and something you're working on?
Do you want to take that?
Excuse me. I think part of the work we need to do in the area of career and technical education, Phil, is in all of those areas and trying to look at some better integration between career and academic and try to look at those pathways. So I think it's certainly on our radar for one of those options, but I really see our work here in the next 12 months is trying to do a lot of conversation with our community and our partners in the community to develop excuse me, what are some of those additional pathways that we need to define for students and where do we have some gaps in our curriculum. That's one that we've obviously talked about before that has been in existence in Iowa City that is no longer right now. We've done some things with the ACE program to try to restart some of that conversation, but we know we still have some holes out there. So I think yes is the easy answer, but it's a more comprehensive look than just in that one specific place too.
I know when I was at City High, when Kim Reynolds was there, that John was just going on and on about the ACE students' participation out there and how enthused they were and that, and I just want to make sure that we follow that student enthusiasm and work on that. Also we offer a lot of AP courses. Again, how many AP courses does the state require us to offer?
We don't have to offer any AP courses.
Right. Well, that's something I hope that we keep in mind going forward, that we offer a lot of college-level courses that, and the district that started the AP program is not doing it anymore. It's what I read an article about it. It's Deerfield Academy or something. They were one of the pioneers in AP curriculum. And that, so I would make sure that we look at that, and also just the problems with AP credit transfer. That there's still some issues with that when students get to that point with that. But that's
what. Can I ask? What does drive that to decide if we're going to go with more AP or not? And what's is that parent interest, student interest? So what's the driving that train?
Yeah, I would say that whenever we think about adding courses, it is a combination of student interest and probably teacher interest as well.
So what, just to speak to what the ladies were talking about here tonight, so where are we at with that kind of programming. I would assume that would come under this kind of purview to add in some targeted programs specifically around, racial justice, history of marginalized communities and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then on top of that, I guess, how involved do we get students in the process and kind of trying to hear what their thoughts are?
Mm-hmm. So we had a discussion about that last spring at the Board of Education work session, and we had a long discussion whether to have an exploratory course where kids could opt in or opt out of, or to make that part of one of our required courses. So the direction the board gave us at that time was to move toward making that part of the required 8th grade and 9th grade courses.
So that was a board decision.
Mhm,
Okay.
at
Thank
that
you.
time.
Great.
Other comments or questions? Thank you very much. An enrollment update.
So if you look at board docs, you've got 2 files in there, and Amy and Matt can definitely speak to the content of those files. The elementary file gives you comparison, baseline data from last year to this year. And the secondary file, this is a new format. We're trying to parallel the elementary one, and so you see baseline data for this year. It gives you an idea of the pupil-teacher ratios by grade level in school at the elementary level, and by departmental offering at the secondary level by school.
Comments or questions?
Yeah, just hang on a second. I'm sorry, I got way too many papers.
Amy or Steve, if maybe you could answer this. So the areas that we show a staffing shortage, for example, Kirkwood 3rd grade or Hills 3rd grade, are there plans to address those, or are we just running short there then?
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you looking at the right-hand side where it shows change in staffing? So if you, perhaps the appropriate column to look at, there's the second one from the right in each of the schools, which shows you the pupil-teacher ratio. You remember that the board has set aspirational goals at the elementary level, and on the top of that, it'll show you for each school what the aspirational goal is. And so the top 6 schools at the elementary level were Tier 1 last year. The 2 schools in the second row, Coralville Central and Man, moved into Tier 1 this year. However, obviously we do the staffing last March, so we staffed them under Tier 2. So right now at this point in time, all the schools on that top row are all staffed at or under the aspirational goals for the weighted resource allocation model in grades K-6. What that shows you in that far right-hand column for Kirkwood is because of a change in enrollment, there's 1 fewer section of 3rd grade. Not that there's a shortage of sections in 3rd grade. Sorry for that lack of clarity.
Now, on this is, and also just some information, because we've got some new board members here too, and just for myself. This is not a head count. This is certified enrollment.
This is the at the elementary level. We're looking at the students in the class.
So,
And
okay,
Amy,
is it a head count or the certified enrollment?
It's the students in seats minus the homeschool students that would be attached to those buildings.
I'll say it again.
So it's students in seats.
So
It's a head count.
It's a head count.
Yes.
Okay, which doesn't take into consideration the weighting of the students that are actually in those
Correct.
seats. So, with our strategic plan, are we meeting our goals on with these numbers?
Yes, we're meeting the aspirational goals set by the weighted resource allocation model.
Now, and also when the averages at these schools, and I'm looking at the junior highs. When you look at English through phys ed, when you have everything in there, that gives one indicator of the class size that way, and music can kind of at some schools can bring it up. But how closely do you look at like the core ones, English, math, science, social studies, world languages, averaging those numbers?
I'm not sure I understood your question there, Phil. Can you restate that? Sorry, I was just sitting back down.
When you take in phys ed and music and all these other ones, when you're looking at the core subjects, those averages. When you look at that, some of these schools really look overcrowded. And the reason I'm asking, I'm sorry if it's entertaining, is that I was at a junior high classroom that a social studies instructor was trying to teach with 34 plus students in the room, and it was extremely challenging. And that's much different than a art room with 36 or a phys ed class with 34.
So are you asking me if I feel like we're overcrowded, or
Well-
I guess I'm still not understanding your question.
Yes, where do you think we're at?
Yeah, and I think I guess maybe better understanding or thinking through what you're asking here, this paints an average, right? So there's going to be individual sections within those averages that, at times run higher. There could be a class of 34. There could also be a class of 26, and some of that's master scheduling at the secondary buildings to sort that out. Do we have some high class sizes in areas? Sure we do. I think that's, obviously part of the situation we've been working through with the state funding model and trying to still shoot those targets the best we can. When you see our averages, I think our principals are doing a great job in trying to keep those averages down and trying to increase schedule efficiency for students. But yes, we still do run into some large class sizes. I think that's a safe comment.
And when it's the head count, it does take into consideration the weighting and the other challenges that when you have students with higher needs that then represent a greater number.
Right. I think that's why it's important to pay attention to those numbers at the top when you look at the socioeconomic status, ELL, special ed, because while you can't tell that in an English, math, science, social studies average, you can get a general feel for the students that building's serving and how that might affect those numbers at that particular building based on the percentage of those students they're serving too. So how that's kind of affecting the makeup of what one of those classes would look like and some of the different student learning needs that would come in there.
Other comments or questions?
Yeah, can somebody remind me what's our? So we have a policy in place to get our SES numbers closer. And can you remind me just what specifically that we're shooting for between schools?
Yeah, the aspirational goals there are try to keep our ELL percentages and our special ed percentages at 20% or less, and try to keep our low socioeconomic status population at 50% or less.
Okay.
Other comments or questions? Thank you. If not, we'll move on to building substitute program update.
Good evening. I'll start by acknowledging Brady's comments from earlier, too, and thank him for that acknowledgement. We started this conversation with the ICEA actually last spring, and I know I had a sidebar conversation with Director Rotland last year, too, about some of the concerns that were arising from our felt like a substitute shortage. So we tried to implement some responses to that at that time. And as Brady said, have been working very directly with the ICEA leadership, and they've been taking information back to their leadership team to try to work together on problem solving on making sure, number one, that we have an adequate number of substitutes and that we have a quality pool of substitutes that we're able to bring into the district. When you look at the information that's in the report, it's an expanded version of the information that I sent out on October 13th, which was that initial inquiry on made by one of the teaching staff, I think, at Northwest Junior High. And so you got some basic information. Some additions to this was end-of-the-month data for the end of October. So what you see in front of you is through October 31st from the start of the school year on August 23rd. We'll have some updated data as the trimester ends as of today, and we'll put all that together as well. The data is focused mostly on our pool of teachers, as that is typically the group that we look to provide substitutes for. We also do for our paraeducators, but I wanted to stay focused with the teacher group right now to give you a picture of what those absences look like, and then again some of the strategies that we're implementing right now in order to try to reduce the amount of time that we don't have coverage for our teachers when they need to be out of their classrooms for a wide variety of reasons. The absences that you see in those totals actually reflect all of the absences. In the charts, I've talked about absences that require to be filled and also absences that do not, so you get a picture, not all of them. Sorry. So you'll see the totals if a teacher needs a partial day, a half day, or a full day. Those are in there too. So sometimes the absence totals are not total days. They're total numbers of times that a teacher put in an absence and we were looking for a substitute. Along with the list of responses to improving the sub rates, the one thing I did want to add is our substitute team and HR team have met on 2 different occasions now with Frontline, who is the company that provides the program that we use to secure substitutes. So it's the ASOP program that is now under Frontline. And so we've had 2 conferences with them now on talking about how to create, how to outreach better, how to create more efficiencies in how we're securing our subs. Are there some specific technologies within that system that we're not accessing that would make us more efficient or be able to reach out in a different way? So we'll have a follow-up conversation again in December. We'd had a couple of glitches during the beginning of the year, probably more than a couple, where the system was not working for substitutes to be able to pick up jobs that were posted. And that's what started some of that conversation with them too. And along the way then they've showed us some tricks within that system that we're hoping will be able, again, to create efficiencies in securing subs.
So I have a couple questions, I guess, that have arisen from our listening posts that I've been to. The first one would be just in regards to that system. One of the things some of the teachers at Alexander brought up was that they felt like some of their positions would be filled because they were posted early, and then when the day of the substitution came, that those would be dropped and the sub would pick up a different school which they may feel would be easier to teach at, in their words. So is there a way to prevent that from happening if someone picks up a substitute position, to not drop it and pick up a different substitute position?
What they should be doing is showing up as unavailable to pick another job up. So if they go in and cancel out on that we can't do anything about that piece. But what we can do is we track that and try to follow up with those substitutes who have a habit of doing that. Because it does put those buildings at a disadvantage, because then that job no longer shows up as available to anybody else. And those job availabilities open at different percentages depending on how far in advance they're posted. I did include a little bit of data about how the averages, the percentages on when jobs are posted. Same day, the morning of, the staff gets up and they have a sick child or they're sick themselves, and we really do have a pretty good fill rate on some of those jobs. Alexander is a building that has 2 building subs secured, and they also, I found out through this process too, that group of 6 buildings also have a group text message that goes out at 6 in the morning to each other. So if somebody is short a sub that day, for example, I got a call from the Alexander principal and she said, I've got 5 or 4 unfilleds today, Jane, I need some help. And they had already contacted each other through that group text, which I didn't realize they were doing, which is great. So if one of the other buildings had their building sub that would be available to travel over to Alexander, they had created that efficiency on their own. So they could send people over much more quickly and take those unfilleds. So what we did was we got on the phone right away and we started reaching out to subs that we thought might be available or people that we could shift to try to help provide some support for that building on that particular day. That is something we try to monitor as far as people that are regularly canceling out on jobs.
So then just to touch on that, the second part of my question, I guess, was going to be on the permanent subs and where we are in filling all of those, because I know that's been an issue. And did you say Alexander has theirs now?
Alexander has theirs. We still have, I should have checked this morning again, we still have, I think we're still short 3 at this time. As far as, we count on having 12. There are 2 per each of the 6 buildings that are out there, and we had not been able to fill all of those. Or what's happening is some of them have been able to secure long-term sub positions, either for maternity leaves or people who have requested FMLA, which takes them out of that pool and they're no longer available on that daily basis. It's a good and a bad at the same time.
So has it been a struggle to find those for just certain buildings or just in general?
When you look at the building percentages, we certainly have some that we have had more difficulty in getting consistent filling.
Okay. So, but you are saying that there are 2 permanent subs right now at Alexander?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And the total number of permanent subs in the district, do you have a handle on that, or how many we have that way?
Pardon me? 9 of 12, I believe.
So there are 3 openings still
Correct.
still available to
Correct.
fill that way, because I know when I put this on the agenda, I was getting emails from people that really wanted a discussion on permanent subs. And when we're talking a permanent sub, is that somebody that is essentially a full-time FTE, or is that or permanent is considered 4 days still, or is it a 5-day position?
We just call them, we call them building subs. We don't necessarily call them permanent, but they are assigned to those particular buildings. They go through a hiring process, and they're assigned for 4 days a week. We pay them at a higher rate because we're actually taking them out of the pool on that 5th day. So those people are available. Their first call is to the building that hired them, and then they are open at that point to fill any opening within the district once they know that they are not needed in the building of assignment.
Yeah. Now, is this the type of a thing that, I mean, we see a lot of unfilled numbers here. Is this the type of thing we should be looking for more, full-time people that, they're there, we plug them in wherever we need them?
We've continued to have those discussions. We currently aren't talking. I know someone had talked about, do we want to put those people on a contract? And I know we hesitate to do that right now with hiring teacher staff across the buildings to help with the class sizes right now, to take those FTE away from the buildings to put them into substitute roles. But we've been talking with the ICEA about trying to expand that maybe into the high school buildings in particular. While they have more staff to help support and fill in, they also tend to have more absences on any given day as well.
And we don't get any, we're getting this. Do we also have sub-problems like in the physical plant and that type of a thing? I know I was at an elementary school that had one janitor and had trouble when that janitor had to be gone for an extended length of time, and that, are we having that same type of substitute problem in other branches, food service, physical plant, that type of thing?
Well, as you look at the beginning of this report, the district specifically hires substitutes in those areas because they require a different level of training. So currently there are 5-day subs, and I'll turn to Dwayne here if I say, or Jeff if I say something incorrectly, looking at hiring a 6th, and then we have 3 night subs with working on hiring a 4th to fill in those substitute openings with custodians. Those aren't people that you can just pull in off the street. They need specialty training. They need to be familiar with the buildings. So those are direct hires of the district. Same thing with nutrition services, and also with our health office associates. Because of the level of training that's required for those people, we do hire them, and that is their sole job, to cover all of the buildings in the district.
Can you speak to how the educational needs are being met in the schools that are struggling on sub days? I mean, I see Alexander, for example, that they have a 73% fill rate. Obviously, those classrooms still have kids in them, so how are those sections being covered?
I would say obviously they have to be covered, and so
Microphone.
it goes back to our building principals to do their best to cover. So sometimes they're in the classroom, sometimes it's our instructional coaches, sometimes it's teachers using their own prep periods to go and cover classrooms. Sometimes it's our Title I teachers or academic support teachers covering. So we just have to make do the best we can.
What you'll see in buildings that have extra sections within a grade level, like for instance, if you have a building with 3 classes within a grade level, they might take that one particular class and split it in half, and then the other 2, they infuse those kids into the other 2 classrooms, so they still get the instruction that the rest of their grade peers are getting. They'll just be a little bigger group on that particular day. Go ahead.
Also, at times we've had to cancel, or if it's a specials area teacher, art, music, or PE, we might have had to cancel that class for the day.
Do we have any data to show how we compare with other districts of our size as far as our absentee rate as compared to others?
That I don't have. That I can work on getting from the other UEN schools.
And
I will say the sub-coverage piece is definitely across the state, if not broader than that.
And also I've had some substitutes concerned about with change in legislation that, making sure that we have qualified instructors, that we don't just have people that can fill in, that we have quality instructors to come in and do that. To what end are we assuring that is being done?
Well, in order for substitutes in the state of Iowa to be able to fill into a classroom, they either have to have the sub-authorization or a substitute teacher license. And that goes back to whatever they have as far as their degree. If it's just a generalist BA degree, they can get the sub-authorization, which enables them to go into a classroom for a period of no more than 5 consecutive days. And then in a particular area, they can't do more than 10 of 30 days. It really restricts they cannot come in other words, as a long-term sub. So that's the sub-authorization. They also can become certified with a substitute license, which is someone who had been or is currently a licensed teacher. And that enables someone to be able to take any class in any content area for no more than 90 days. So it expands that because they are a certified teacher.
And do we have subs of both categories?
Yes, we do. Okay. And also our teachers are really good. In the report I talked about the preferred sub list, so you'll have teachers that reach out to people either with their own certifications or that are knowledgeable about that content area. And so those are the first people contacted by the system when there's an absence that occurs. And a lot of times our teachers are reaching out when they know in advance and lining those up. So they make sure that instruction still happens.
So that looks like that'd be just a logistical nightmare to make sure that you're with the right group and that they can be there for that length of time. And if you have the one that can only be in there for 5 days, you have to make sure they don't exceed it. Yeah.
Yep. System tracks that.
Okay, very good. Do we have any numbers as far as how many classrooms on an average day go without a sub? Or you're saying we have? There's never a situation where that happens. We have a principal step in or something along those lines.
We have coverage at some level. There is an adult with those children, and whether it's, again, we expand the class size, we bring in the instructional coaches, the principals go in, there is an adult with those children trying to carry out the instruction for that given day. So I don't have where I can say there's no one there. There's always coverage. It may be in some instances where, especially at the secondary level, you may see where students are sent to a study hall, for example. So instead of reporting to the classroom, we do not have a teacher in place. They might be sent to the study hall, and they're provided with time to complete homework.
I would just want to point out that while these numbers maybe don't look terrific, just for reference, I did compare them to the numbers you gave us in January, which were for October and November of last year. And I recognize that this is 2 different time periods. Possibly, maybe in November there's more absences, but the numbers are improved greatly from what they were last year. There's only 4 elementary schools where they dropped, and of those 4, there's 5 elementary schools where they dropped, and of those 5, only 1 is a high on RAM 1 level need school. So, and that's Alexander. Unfortunately, they went from 76% coverage to 73%, which is not what we want to see at Alexander. And I'm not minimizing the problem by any means. I recognize that we need 100% coverage everywhere. But I do want to thank you for the efforts that you made in the last year. I think what I have written down in January, that you said you were going to raise the sub pay and that there's a sub advisory council that you were putting in place, and I don't know what other changes you've made, but I am glad to see that it is improving in some places. It probably doesn't feel like that to the teachers that are being pulled from their classrooms or their planning periods, or the principals that are being pulled. Probably doesn't feel any better to them, but in reality, the numbers, at least comparing, because I assume these numbers for this year are from the beginning of the school year through October 31st, and the numbers from last year were October and November.
Correct.
So again, not apples to apples necessarily, but some improvement. So do more of what we're doing and try and drive that number up even more to get a better fill rate. I would love to see those positions, the building subs, personally, and I know this is a budget question that I hope we'll get to discuss at a later time, but I would like to see those be full positions with benefits and full 5-day-a-week positions, because as you have clearly shown in the numbers here, Friday is a much bigger day for absences, and I'm guessing that for those subs that are 4 days a week, Friday might be a day that they might choose not to be there, so that probably becomes, I really get concerned about the mental health of our teachers being able to sustain with all that they're asked to do just on it, with their own classroom and then pick up extras.
I will say with that, though, Director Orland, sorry to interrupt, the one qualifier we have with the building substitutes is they are required to pick up Monday and Friday because we know those are short days. And then the building principals have the flexibility then on which of the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday schedule that they fill.
Okay. Would love to see building subs at especially the junior high level. Those are some of our lowest fill rates. As I look at the numbers, even the elementaries, with the exception really of Alexander and Hills and Longfellow, it looks like that's a little bit lower. Our junior highs are pretty low in the fill rates, comparatively speaking. So if we can expand those building sub positions. Now, how does that work in a junior high with a building sub where you've got, 8 topics? Can you hire a building sub that can teach? I mean, no, you can't because they're not certified in all those subjects. So how does that work? Or how could it work?
Well, I guess I would look at that as when you've got somebody that's part of your building. When we set those up, ideally in the beginning of the year, those people stay within those buildings for the first couple of weeks because what we're hoping for is they get used to the routine of that building. They get to be seen as part of the staff for those children, and they also get to understand the curriculum. So I would think that when we're looking at the secondary level too, we'd have people with some level of background or certification in order to be able to do that job. And then again, with absences that are known, they would have an opportunity to sit down and network with the teacher, get the lesson plans, and be walked through the units that the kids are working on at that time. We've talked back and forth with the principals that have the building subs about what makes the most sense with those people that are there. Do they want them filling the long-term postings, the teacher that in 2 weeks is going to be out to attend a meeting here at the ESC, I almost said CAO, or do we want them to be the people held back for those 6 o'clock in the morning calls that someone's got a sick child and we don't have as much notice to get those filled? And they've had a lot of conversation about that. I think that's where those building subs can come in the most handy because they can, in a lot of cases, step in because they already know a lot of the kids. So that's our hope is you've got that same person in there all the time. They understand the routine, and then the teacher can meet with them to get them prepped for the actual lesson for the next day or whenever that absence is going to occur.
So in the junior highs, if we put in building subs there, could they pop between different subjects? Science, math, art, music, and still maintain quality of classroom instruction?
I think they could. It would be probably higher than if they weren't part of that building, although there are still some cases, too, where we look at if you've got a preferred sub that has the background within your subject area. And I would look at our specialist teachers, our music people, even in the art. I know we have people who have an art background who are very good subs, and that would be the go-to for a specialized teacher in a particular building would probably want that trained person to take that opening there. Because the thing, as long as we maintain that flexibility where those people can be kicked to another building to help support that classroom if there's no opening in their building, I think that gives us that flexibility to have the highly trained sub fill in while their sub is able to take care of another absence.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
Just to kind of piggyback on that with the high or with the technical, if we have a junior high level, the shop instructor is absent. Do we have someone that can step in and still run a woodworking course and a program like that, or are they all going to the study hall?
Typically what will happen with those students is there's usually a computer component with that too, so the instructor may have lessons with the safety lessons that come up. They may have them doing the 3D drawings or something that's not necessarily using the tools in the wood shop, and we typically do not have the kids in the wood shop or with a substitute teacher.
Unplug the miter saw. So I'll just point out also to some of my board colleagues that probably the main thing you're worried about when you have a sub is classroom management. I mean, that's just the key. If they're expert in calculus, can they keep the kids engaged? And this relationship piece is huge. Having a building sub who knows the kids, who gets to know the culture of the building, who the kids see as a part of the building is monumental. Is this the first year we've done this?
This is the second year.
Second year. So I would echo full steam ahead. I'd really like to see those full-time contracted employees. And then maybe those are also part of our pool of who become our permanent teachers, and we can have a little bit of a career ladder for folks. I would emphasize from my end getting some of these folks CPI trained, making sure they're ready to go into a BD room, and I know this is tricky in a discussion with ICEA, but if we can come up with a way to incentivize people to go to Alexander, to go to the Kirkwoods, to go to these places that have those high rates that are different environments than other schools. I think as we move forward meeting our aspirational goal to get our schools at 50% FRL, and I believe, a lot of board colleagues are really serious about making that happen, to help that in the macro scale. But until we get there, we're going to have some high need areas, and I don't know if there are ways we can incentivize people to get to those buildings, but I'd like to kind of think about that and keep the work up here as a board. But I think this is a great job. It's a great program. I'm really excited. It's something I wanted for a long time in the district, was to see building subs to help with that piece. So thanks for the work.
That's good. Well, you can tell there's a lot of energy and passion around this particular topic, and so thank you for the updates. Unless there's further comments or questions, I think we'll move on to the next item, which is special education.
Having a little bit of technical difficulty, so Kristen's going to straighten that out. Oh, thank you. Good evening. I am thrilled to death to be providing you with more than one update this year, hopefully several actually. And I think this is great timing. Early on, Jane and I had presented about the just general updates about a whole bunch of things. But now we know that throughout this year, we're going to have regular meetings of the Seclusion and Restraint Task Force. And it probably makes the most sense for board updates just to follow those meetings because we'll have four meetings this year. So that really gives me 4 opportunities to update. And I could probably update at every meeting because I love special ed and I love to talk about special ed. And we have a lot of wonderful things going on. But I'll try to stick to the 4. But thanks again for asking me. Tried to boil this down. Yeah. I tried to boil this down. I want to make sure that we're going over, and some of this we've kind of talked about in my last update, but I know that several of you are new to the board since then. So I wanted to revisit what our priorities are for the work for this year, and probably ongoing, because none of these things are simple. In fact, nothing really in special education is simple. Everything is really hard, and it takes doing really well. The students that we're talking about who have IEPs in the district need for us to have everything really, really good for them. So we're going to continue to hack away at the work probably forever. So I just want to frame that for you so that we see these as ongoing projects and not something that's going to be done. Many of them will not be done. First of all, I think it's really important to keep talking about creating and living out a strong vision for quality programming for students with disabilities in the district, particularly with alignment with IDEA, the district mission statement, strategic plan, and the full breadth of the general program plus more for our students with IEPs. The continued work in the area of behavior supports, and I would even kind of add to that some more specific investigation around mental health supports in the district to weave in with those behavioral strategies. Integrating work across the system, I think it's really important too for us to continue to talk about with the other directors, with all of our folks here in the district office, with our principals, with our teachers, with really every point along the system. We need to have a coordinated effort and integrated work, and continue to make sure that what we're doing in every area applies to all students. And then supporting principals, teachers, paras, because those are the folks that take that vision and make it come alive for the students. I will not serve 1,400 students. I will not be in 1,400 IEP meetings. I will not ever consistently and very, very regularly be in the 26 buildings that we have. That's not the function of my job. It can't be the function of my job. It's not the function of any of us here. So that's why really making sure that we empower and support the folks who are on the front lines, doing the work every single day with the students, and the closest point to the students feel empowered and supported. And then, we're really taking a hard look at the district support structures, positions specifically here at the ESC that support the work, and the role of each of the positions. And I keep on saying to people, we support the people who support the people who support the students. We're not student service providers. We need to see our function as making it possible for other people to be student service providers. And really clarifying each of the support positions within, especially our department, the special ed department, that all of those folks know exactly what is their function, what can and should they be flexible about with their work, what are the things that we really need to stick to as far as their particular positions, just clarifying those things. I think that clarity is important for the people who are doing the job, and the clarity is important for people who need to access the people doing the job. When people don't know who to go to for what, that just wastes a lot of time. So we just need a clarity and alignment around what we're doing. We're looking at data pulls, supporting ongoing compliance. I've had a lot of questions about how are we going to support ongoing compliance. We're going to make sure that teachers and principals understand what compliance looks like. And then we're going to try to give them a lot of tools in order to maintain that compliance. Right now we don't have good data readily available to either teachers or principals in a format that supports ongoing compliance. So I think there are a lot of things that we need to be able to do, and are looking at ways to do that. A lot of them are technology-based to give principals and teachers a snapshot of here's what it looks like. Of the 15 IEPs on your caseload, here's how many right now are up to date with progress monitoring entry. So they just have a better understanding of what to do. Those compliance pieces, in the mind of teachers and somewhat principals, they have students in front of them. They're not necessarily thinking of those compliance pieces as job number one. And I don't actually disagree with that. I think it's our job to provide them with information that they can use as reminders of job number two. Building a singular message across the district and AEA support positions. Our Grantwood AEA partners we've been really working closely to try to make sure that again, there's support folks that are out in the trenches in the buildings and working with teachers and in IEP meetings and working with parents and all the different levels that they work at too. That we should have a unified message. We should all understand the vision and where are we heading. There may not be a identical message, and there doesn't need to be an identical message. That's not what we're after, but we're after really a unified direction. So we've been spending a lot of time together working really hard on that. Communication relationships with parents and parent groups. is something that we're always going to be wanting to do a better job with. So we'll talk a little bit more about that too in a minute. So again, we have some additional priority work. And one of those really important pieces is the redesign of the process to update the special ed plan, the district developed service delivery plan for special education. That very same one that was recommended in August, which was a process that had been gone through last year exactly as the state has prescribed. That the process that the district underwent to make that draft of the plan was the expected process. It was fully compliant and absolutely, done well by the appropriate committee of people. It meets all of the requirements. But at that time, there was some concern at the board level about, is there any way we could get additional input? Could we put it at least out for further public review, which was a great idea, and we actually did that, and then on the website as it was before, but then also mailed it home to families who had been flagged in Power School as having a child with an IEP, which isn't extremely accurate. That was the one thing that I think we'll have to work out going forward, is that we don't have a good way to pull addresses or email addresses or anything. So we probably maybe didn't send to some homes we would have liked to, and probably did send to some homes that we didn't necessarily mean to, but I think it was a really good effort at getting it to the house for people. And I honestly believe, I heard a lot of comments that people really appreciated that, and the time for extra review and especially the extra opportunity. So based on some of the I did receive several comments based on the plan then from that mailing. And based on some of those comments, we are going back to the process and designing right now a more comprehensive process than what's actually required, which is designed to gain very large amounts of information, which is not a requirement from the Department of Education to have most or all of parents of students with disabilities able and really readily available to be able to give input. Is a goal of ours this time around, and it is not a requirement. So we're really looking at intentionally going above and beyond the requirements that we have in order to get a plan that is reflective of just a larger group, and primarily parents of students with IEPs. But we'll also be looking at how to capture student level information, opinions from students. Student information is really important. I think, that this is who we're doing it for. And I think their opinions about what's being done for them and how we're doing it are usually, when we've gone to the extra, effort to get student feedback, it's been strangely insightful. Even kids that are really little kids can give really good feedback that I think we really need to listen to. So basically that's what we're trying to get at here. Intentionally incorporating various platforms for input. So we're looking at possibly a survey and then some telephone interviews and then some really specifically designed focus groups also. So there would be like 3 different levels of input. And this particular structure that we're after would really be conducive to looking at student data and outcomes for the students with IEPs, and which is also not a requirement of the DE prescribed process. So we really want to say, how are we doing in a lot of different kinds of data, all the data that's available, and we're looking at those ways now. But according to how are we doing right now, might give us some insight into what we need to continue to try to do better. So, and then we're seeing this as a district, community, and AEA joint effort, just a project that we really want to see those 3 parts engage in equally. The other result of the way that we're trying to design it will be that it will lead to the completion of a formal special education communication plan. Kristen and I had already been working on that, but it got kind of to the point where unless communication works for the people who are needing to give and receive it, then it doesn't work. It has to meet the needs of the people that we're trying to communicate with. And I really didn't have a good process for getting a lot of information to determine that, and what our preferred ways of communicating, what do we need a communication around. I don't see communication as that I'm just going to be giving people information all the time. That's not communication. That's me giving people information. Communication, we need to have ways for it to go for that information to be exchanged with some sort of regularity. Well, how much regularity is a good amount? Because we don't want to overwhelm people with too much communication either. So we just really felt like we needed some more information, and this is the perfect way for us to gather that. This is where there's in your packet, there's a contract that is we're asking for approval for a contract with Beth Steenwick. I really feel strongly that we should have Beth come and help us gather some of this information. First of all, because she would actually be helping us design questions for each level of that, those opportunities for input that really will get at what it is we're trying to find out, and then also be facilitating a lot of it. She's an impartial third party that I really feel like people should feel and probably will feel comfortable talking to. We're looking for ways to, engage others in collecting some of that data too, because we want to have such a big data set that we're going to have multiple people collecting. But I feel kind of strongly that it really shouldn't just be, and maybe not at all, district people. Sometimes people aren't going to talk to someone freely from the district. I have actually talked to several parents about the last survey that was sent out for special education, and several people have mentioned to me that there was possibly a fear from some parents that there could be some personally identifiable information within that survey that if they said something negative, that would be held against their child. Whether or not that's realistic or a valid concern doesn't matter. That's how they feel. And I think as long as the district sort of heads up that project to gather all that information and people don't have a different venue for giving it, that there could still be some concern like that. So we just want to take every possible barrier out for people so that they can speak freely with input. So are there any questions about the Beth Steenwick before we kind of go on?
Do we need to vote on that? Do we need to approve that?
You would need to approve that, yes.
And do we want to take that up right now before you finish your presentation?
Whatever you think is appropriate, it's fine with me.
Comments from board members on that recommendation? Finish first?
I certainly can. I forgot to mention that the AEA feels that this is really a strong, good fit for us too, that they're sharing half the cost of Beth coming here. Beth was involved with us in the past last year and is very familiar, has a good history actually with the district around some of the things that have been concerns in the past, and just sort of has the ability to pick right up on, understands what's already been done.
For new board members, she was appointed by the Department of Education to assist us in developing a compliance plan, so the Department of Ed sent her to us to start with, and that's one of the reasons that we talked about bringing her back in conjunction with the AEA, because she'd be a good bridge to the work that we did with the Department of Ed.
Okay, an update on restraint and seclusion. Again, this is my second update about the implementation of task force action plan, which included regular task force updates. Like I said, it's kind of almost like an oversight committee that what we said we would do, that we're implementing that on the timelines that we said we would implement. and includes the updates, training for de-escalation, investigation of evidence-based alternatives, improved communication as far as with parents about events that have happened, improved reporting and record keeping around what sort of events have happened, intervention plan implementation integrity, making sure that the plans that we have are well implemented, and ongoing implicit bias and culturally responsive instruction training. So we're, as I had reported before, we are progressing with all of those things. The training for de-escalation has been offered at every building, and I think will be completed at every building by, I think it's the middle of January. And we have had a wonderful response for that. Lots of, all buildings have wanted to have it. So that's good news. Investigation of evidence-based alternatives. We have currently another group going, a partnership with the university, child psychiatry, and CDD departments, they have an advisory group who will be working with us and a team of district folks to investigate what are the gold standard practices, the things that we should make sure that teachers have in their tool belt in order to effectively and confidently serve students who have behavioral and mental health needs in the district. You know, everywhere I've been, there's been sort of this confusion between programming, which are solutions that we offer to students, services, exactly what are we going to do for them, and programs, which indicates more of a one-size-fits-all. This is what we think the program should be, and if you go to the program, that's what you're going to get. We've kind of been heavier on programs. We're trying to shift more to programming, which would be more individualized supports. But when we're individualizing supports, we need to know what is it we need to do for the student. In the end, that is the thing that matters the most anyway. But this part of it is, what do we need to make sure that teachers what are those things they can mix and match for their students to come up with just the right supports at just the right times? So what are those things? What's evidence-based? Because there are a lot of things that might be fun or neat to do that may not make any difference for the student at all. So that's where our advisory folks from the university are going to come in and help us with that evidence base for different strategies. And then also with training of how do we make sure, is this something our teachers can do? Is it something that, if so, how do we access training for them? I guess the important message that I would want everyone to take away is that what are the right solutions for the student? How can we get the very best practice to the student instead of thinking of it the other way around? Our Chapter 103, I think I talked about last time, our electronic documentation. We are running monthly reviews at the building level and at the district level. And now we're actually going out offering and sending more resources to the building level based on our district level review. And the last time we even met, I think we agreed that the superintendent and associate superintendents would all be involved in that monthly review at the district level. We just need to have a large variety of resources that we have available to help people when they need it. So we got to get the right people in the room to have a trigger point for, hey, we need help. And that's what the scheduled reviews are for. So I feel really good about that. Again, it's what are we going to do for the student? And unless we can position ourselves to decide that, that's where things start to fall apart. Implicit bias and culturally responsive instruction training, our buildings are on sort of a schedule for rolling of that training, which is underway. Intervention plan implementation integrity is probably one of the most important things that we're trying to focus on right now. We can't just have good plans, we have to implement them. So again, we need some of those kind of structural pieces to be in place for checking on that. High-level plans are really hard to maintain implementation of. Over time, they just kind of naturally slide. So we need to put some automatic processes in place where we are checking on that regularly. So we're working on that.
I apologize. If I just had some questions before you go on. I may forget them.
Sure.
In your investigation of evidence-based alternatives, are you looking at districts and schools that don't use seclusion?
We're considering any and all evidence-based strategies.
So you are looking at districts that that do not use it.
We haven't started meeting yet, but I think that we will. I think we will investigate all promising practices. I think we would need to make sure that the specific treatment is what's working, because there are a lot of possible explanations behind why a district may not use seclusion or restraint, and we would want to know, like, is that because what they're doing is the very best thing that can be done? What kind of a research base does a certain strategy have? Because that's all, there's a wide range of variance, and that's why we need, the folks from the university, that's what they are specialists in, especially, making sure that what we're doing is sound, and it's what we should be doing. We can hear a lot about what different districts are doing, but it's really hard to say whether that is the factor that's, making it possible for them not to use restraint or seclusion. But I definitely would not rule out hearing of a promising practice from any other district. We do that all the time already, share strategies with other districts to give us some insight into what to look more into as far as the sound gold standard evidence base.
Sure. And also on improving reporting, and earlier you said you're not, you have no good data. Are you contemplating cameras at all? I mean, we have cameras on all our buses and that type of, is this something that the district would benefit with investing in cameras in these situations?
No, that is not the kind. The reference here is to what the task force had decided should be the further actions, and they're talking about reporting back to parents about the specific indicators that we by law have to report to parents, those very specific things that parents need to be able to know and that we need to keep track of.
So you're opposed to using cameras?
I'm referring to the task force action plan is what I was referring to here, that the improved reporting was specifically relative to parents on the task force feeling like they may not be getting information that gives them insight into what actually happened, or not enough of it, is my understanding. I mean, I wasn't at the, obviously I wasn't even here.
And I'm asking a very general question. As far as if there would be any benefit for our district to invest in cameras and helping us with getting a handle on our special ed needs.
I don't know. I haven't looked into that. I'm not sure about the legalities of it. I know we have cameras some places, but we can't. I don't know if we could use the footage for what we need it to do. I don't know. I have never asked that. Physical confinement and detention is what we call seclusion, which was decided by the task force as the language that we would use. In Iowa Code, administrative code is referred to as physical confinement and detention. And it really means the confinement of a student in a timeout room or some other enclosure, any other enclosure, whether within or outside the classroom from which the student's egress is restricted. And from which the student's egress is restricted is the really important part there. I think that, probably not just in this area of the state, but everywhere, there's become this confusion of a specific place, which there are some specific places used for confinement and detention, but really it could be any place. If we restrict the student's egress, that is what is defined in Chapter 103 as physical confinement detention, and is what we're supposed to be reporting. We just try to make that clear with staff all the time. If in this boardroom we restricted a child's egress and did not let them leave, then we are supposed to be reporting that as a physical confinement and detention. Just because it isn't in an enclosure that would have otherwise been known as a seclusion room or a physical confinement detention room has nothing to do with the reporting, really. Whether or not it's operated in any space that is purposely set aside for that purpose, we still need to report it, and it really is considered physical confinement detention if we have blocked the egress, period. So that can happen in a lot of different places and does happen a lot of different places. There are some actual parameters that any place that we would detain or confine a student into would not would need to meet some really general guidelines, which are also found in the administrative code, but don't necessarily lead to a space that we would normally think of as a seclusion, confinement, or detention space. This boardroom would meet those criteria. A lot of spaces, literally hundreds of spaces in our schools would meet those criteria. So it's the act of restricting egress that is the important part, what makes it physical confinement and detention. So as you know, we had issued a statement that we were going to be, put my glasses on, that we're committed to discontinuing the use of the temporary seclusion rooms, sometimes referred to in the general public as isolation boxes, within our schools by the beginning of the 18-19 school year. That we fully recognize the role of restraint seclusion and providing a free, appropriate public education for students in the least restrictive environment, which means our public schools, and that students with a formal safety plan developed in coordination with their parents, guardians, with needs that differ, and the district will work with parents and guardians to meet the needs of their student. We have students who currently have that physical confinement or detention within their safety plan, sometimes within their IEP. So any services that are written into an IEP, we as a district legally have to implement, and we are committed to implementing. And while also making sure that we're looking at every other possible solution, all of those really good services and plans up front that we talked about, that we're making sure we make full use of all of those preventative strategies. But if the team has determined, based on information through a functional behavior assessment and IEP behavior intervention planning, that a student needs occasionally a safe area as part of their safety plan within their IEP, we will have a safety area a safe area for that student that we can implement their IEP plan. We simply have to, and we are committed to doing that. So I know that could be confusing. We have had some temporary rooms, the ones that we're talking about, removed, and that number of 7 was since the end of last school year when the task force recommendation was made.
Can you tell us exactly what buildings they've been removed from?
Yes. Over time, they had been removed or repurposed. Some of the areas have been repurposed, actually. Some buildings had multiple rooms that used for this purpose to begin with. That's why I think, some people have commented, and I understand where this thinking comes from, that it's kind of a moving target. What are the actual numbers? It sounds like a simple question that is really more complicated because of the flexibility of use of some of the rooms that we could potentially use for this purpose. The fact that some were designed to be portable and temporary and others were not. That's why some have been repurposed Sometimes teachers, when we went to say, hey, you're not using this space, we know you don't have any plans right now in the building that or on your roster that where you would need this, they've said, yeah, but I really like it because I just want the door taken off because my kids really like to go in there and have a quiet place to work. That is not physical confinement and detention when a student elects to go into a space for a private work area. And so at that time, if teachers said that, at least the times when I was here and had those conversations, I said, well, there's no reason for us to need to take it out yet. This was over the summer. If you feel like it's a valuable space where your students really like to use, then I didn't see a harm in it continuing. So with that, we did remove, we have removed or repurposed rooms at Kirkwood, Longfellow, Wickham, City, Garner, Horn, Penn, Weber, North Central Junior High, Southeast Junior High, and Liberty.
Okay, I have Kirkwood, Longfellow, Wickham, City, Garner, Southeast. What were the other ones I missed?
Kirkwood, Longfellow, Wickham, City, Garner, Horn, Penn, Weber, North Central Junior High, Southeast Junior High, and Liberty at some
That's more
point
than
in time.
7.
Right. At some point in time, all of those buildings have had relatively recently.
Okay, so, and I'll respectfully rephrase my question. Of the ones that were repurposed, how many were actually removed and how many were repurposed?
I'm going to defer to Dwayne on that.
And does a repurposed room, is that just the door is removed and the room still stays, or I know like at City High, they might have shelves and things like that in there, using it for storage, that type of a thing. I understand that, but if it's been repurposed, it could easily be purposed again, that type of a thing. So,
it could be, yes. Right.
Could you provide us at some point in time the ones that are actually removed, where there's
absolutely,
it's not even a closet anymore?
Yep. Be happy to. Other questions or comments about that piece?
Well, if we go any further, I don't know about any of the other board members, but when this came out in the media, I personally would have liked to have been involved in knowing a little bit about that before I hear about it on the KCRG. And we're all supposed to be part of a team here and working together and everything like that, and we all want you to be successful, and we're all in it for your success. But I think it's important that you keep the board informed on these major things that come out, so when people ask us about it, we have a little bit more than just what we're going by, what's been reported in the media.
Yes.
Let me speak to that 1 second, Lisa. And I think it goes back to, you said you want your team to all have the same message.
Yes.
And I think so do we. We want it, when the press calls me, I want to be able to have the message and know where we're going and feel confident that this is what we can say as a unified board, as a unified district, that, this is, because, that this is my field, and I know that it's really complicated, and it involves a lot of things. And so I will have a comment later about how we can help, and a question maybe, when you're done. But just that as you're kind of rolling us out, I know this is your first year, that, we can sort of develop, not that we can't disagree and have differences of opinion and discussions at the board table, but on some of this stuff, it'd be nice to be able to say, this is where we're headed, this is our mission, this is how we're going to get there. And this is a piece of that, and I appreciate all this.
So the work underway, like I said, we have follow-up work to evaluate student needs at each building in order to determine the physical arrangements needed going forward. Like I appreciated the comment of we have some spaces that could be purposed to, just as it were repurposed, it could be purposed. Right. And the reason for that is because we have to provide a free, appropriate public education to all students. We don't have other places where we send our students, and even if we had that option, I wouldn't be for it. I want all students here in Iowa City. I want all students within our school district. In order to educate students with sometimes really, really significant needs in our school district, with their peers, in a gen ed school like everyone else goes to, we have to have ways to keep them safe. And so in those cases that are really, really specifically planned by their IEP teams, which is the appropriate place to do that planning, and we have a need for a safe area. So consistent with the task force recommendation of continuing, when needed, the use of restraint seclusion, there could be a time where we have a student that we're going to need to find a safe place for. And what that safe place looks like for that student will depend on the needs of the student. And it should most closely resemble every other area of the school if possible. And we'll make adjustments only when needed. But saying we're not going to educate your child because they have a behavioral disability which requires them to have a safe space is not something we can, should, or would want to do. Right, we will definitely, and we need to make those determinations on a building by building by building basis, because it depends on who we're talking about, what we would need to do for them. So we will safely educate all students, and so therefore they're going to need to be planning at the building level. Building teams will be fully involved in that evaluation of the areas that we need. IEP safety plans will continue to be implemented. IEP teams will continue discussion of how to best meet ongoing student needs. And probably, if there's one takeaway from the entire presentation, I would want everyone to know that the most important thing that we're doing about this entire issue is that we're going to ensure the focus continues to be on increasing and improving that problem-solving ability, and the skills of our teachers to continue to serve students more and more and more effectively, increasingly complicated students. So, and making sure that we have good processes in place for ensuring that we're doing the best job possible in that area, and engineering really high quality behavior plans and just great services to students. So what questions?
Yeah, my big one is, so in the document that you sent, well, I guess it's from the seclusion and restraint meeting, you ask the board, or it states that the board needs to direct administrators to really use our behavior folks and listen to them. Administrators need to be directed by the board to listen and require the support of the behavior analysts, challenging behavior teams in the districts, and AEA. And so that's where I'd like some guidance to policy and governance. How can we do that? What does that policy look like that ensures, because I know, I really know how hard fidelity is in behavior plans. I lived that for a very long time. So what can we do, that's not micromanaging, but that creates a policy that states what our mission is, that says, hey, we have these folks who really know behavior, and they can help, and we need to listen to them to get that fidelity. So, so not that you have to answer this right now, but I think, just looking at my P&G members, that's kind of where I want to go with our P&G discussion, is what's that policy going to look like? I know I had an idea, but my idea was prefaced on the fact that we would have these sort of plywood boxes still, and that we would just define that we wouldn't use them for discipline. But this is, now that we're repurposing and we're really looking at this at a deeper level, I think our policy needs to be deeper and I don't know exactly what that wordsmithing is, and I don't know what that language is to say. We've got experts. There is gold standard. I mean, the folks I know, right, the folks you're bringing in, it's we're getting the best we can in the area. And I know these best practices. I've used them really successfully often. And so I know they're out there, and a lot of times it is just an educational piece, or it's a different mindset, right, that people have approaching behavior, that it's more willful and the child, and so some districts, Phil, that don't educate those kids. They send them out. They suspend them and they call the cops, or they send them to different districts.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So they can get away with that. And, because my job, I call hundreds of schools. And I can tell you, many schools don't understand this. And they think those kids are bad kids, and they get them out of their buildings. And I'm not going to stand for that in Iowa City. I don't think that's where we want to be. We want to educate them here. And so whatever guidance you can provide to help P&G steer that and maybe help the board come up with a policy, I'd really, really appreciate.
Thank you.
I just have a quick follow-up again on our listening post that we had. Some of the struggles that we heard at Twain and Alexander both centered around the fact that they only have one behavior interventionist, and it seems that they're always working, or in Twain's case, it seemed that they were always in the same classroom all day, which means that they're probably not getting around as much as they need to in other areas. Has there been any discussion of bringing more than one into a building?
Behavior interventionist, is that what you said? Because that's a different job here than our special education behavior focused teachers. If behavior interventionists are folks that are on the ground implementing plans that are challenging behavior people have set up, and work under the direction of those challenging behavior people. And right now, we only have general education behavior interventionists. We're looking at the possibility of one in special education, but we haven't been able to hire it. So the original question was, are we looking at more?
Yeah, I guess maybe to get a little bit more in detail, I think that some of the discussion that we had at those meetings was that, and maybe it's, I don't know, it's still too early in the year or what, but some of the kids that are coming in that may need special education services haven't been, I don't know what the proper word is, they haven't been screened far enough, and to say that they need the plan. So sometimes the behavior interventionist is the one working with that child, where it maybe should be they needed a one-on-one para or whatever it is. So
the message that came loud and clear at Alexander is they need help. And they need help in a lot of areas. And I know we've got the past special ed director that's going over there along with some other schools. But the biggest takeaway I got from the Alexander listening post is that's got to be addressed immediately.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
So I would just share that with our 20 elementary buildings that we have deployed resources differently based on their needs. All buildings have access to principal, counselor, and SFA role, so school family advocate role. All 20 of them do. Not necessarily all 20 full-time FTE. Of course, the principal is full-time. But depending on their size, they might not have full-time. It might be half-time counselor or SFA. In addition to that, based on some other factors, we have SAMs in 13 of our 20 buildings who oftentimes focus their work around behavior. And then in 6 of our buildings, they have this behavior interventionist role. So the 2 buildings that you're referring to have access to all 5 of those roles. So you can see the picture that I'm painting there, the amount of resources that we're putting into those buildings are to support things like social, emotional, behavioral needs of the students. So in addition to that, I'd have to speak to each unique situation. We have deployed resources in the last couple of weeks in addition to what they've already kind of been staffed at. Not only are we talking about human resources, we're also talking about technical assistance from our AEA partners that can go in and look at implementation around PBIS, what that's looking like in buildings, and then also look at the kiddos that are on our Tier 2 and our Tier 3 plans. And so when you're talking about the students that are being served by that behavior interventionist role, it is typically students that we've taken a long look at and put together a pretty formal behavior intervention plan. And so There's work going on. It's not work that's done quickly. We do recognize the needs that are there, though. So I had to share that.
Just touching on the counselor part, since you brought it up. So you say it's based on size of the schools, how we're determining how it is. Like Twain's is what, 0.75? Is that right?
I'd have to look at it.
Yeah,
I'd
I
have to
think
go back and
that's
look, Paul.
What we were told,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I mean, has there been discussion of switching that look, not necessarily based on just the number of kids there, but the needs of the school and the kids there? I mean, there's, from what we heard, they needed, a full-time counselor there all the time, and they don't have it.
Sure.
So, I mean, there's just more need. They have students and frankly, staff that have some more, staff has mental health needs because of what they're dealing with every day. But I'm just curious if that's ever been discussed to change how we look at that, or in addition is, I guess, what I'm getting at.
Constantly evaluating that. Some of those positions fall within our categorical funds, and so we've been asking ourselves that same question: do we need more of a RAM implementation around those specific positions as well? I think if you looked at it, you would feel like there is a RAM implemented, with maybe not formally being stated that way, but if you could see how the resources are deployed, it would look heavier at that end where you would typically see more resources being devoted for our higher RAM schools.
So that would be something that we as a board would have to discuss and decide if we wanted to implement that.
A RAM model for
model.
guidance counselors and that kind of thing. Can I ask, who are the behavior interventionists? What kind of training do they have?
Sure. So they typically have sometimes come out, have the same background, social worker background, and then the additional training that they would receive. We would be hopeful that they would attend several trainings, like a behavior basics training, functional behavior assessment training. The AA is, I think, has 4 or 5 courses that we try to get them to in that first year, and then
So these are
follow
people with social work degrees?
for the most part. I would have to ask Laura Daly or
Okay.
lean on Jane. So
Okay. I mean, I'm just wondering if they're paras, or are they paid like certified teachers? No. So they're paid on a teacher's schedule?
No.
No. It's
I think the base is $36,000.
so it's like a separate.
Yeah.
They're not covered
Yeah.
by ICA. It's a separate.
And just a little bit of history. I understand that maybe these rules were in place before. Maybe we went away from them, have been recently implemented again. So I would also have to pick Jane's brain here to see if they are all degreed. That's the goal, but I'm not certain that all 6 are at this point.
Okay. Do they get CPI?
Yes.
Okay.
And just to talk about it one more time, but the schools that I was at, those 2 individuals were very highly regarded by the staff there. They just felt that they were very overworked.
I believe that fully, that they're the most appreciated people, oftentimes.
Yeah, that was a very, very, very big message. Maybe the biggest key takeaway was they immediately felt they needed more resource for that support. And you can see in this case of Alexander, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but when you have higher rates of unfilled subs, and then you've got more, I think they said 17 Tier 3 students at Alexander. I mean, these things just kind of snowball a bit, and makes it tough for students to keep their classes going and minimize disruption and keep their kids learning. And so anything we can do to try to address those immediate needs while the longer term issues are being addressed, I think would be really fantastic.
Is that something we can do? I mean, can we just send somebody? I mean, I know you got to hire somebody and get somebody trained and have somebody who's good. You can't just send anybody, but I mean, because it might happen every year, right? Where you have a school, for whatever reason, you have a really tough 3rd grade class, and it really boils over in those first few weeks. Can we do some kind of emergency? Because really serious about. We know a lot of this has to do with FRL numbers, right? That's obvious. And so I am absolutely committed as a board to changing those numbers at the elementary level with some really drastic things.
So
until then.
So what wasn't shared that night with you, I know that there was a list of proposed strategies that some staff members
I wasn't there.
Okay, that some staff members came up with. I would say it's probably been about 3 weeks ago now. We did deploy resources, both
Wonderful.
human and technical assistance. That looks like a couple of additional days of administrative administrative support through winter break and see what's happening by then. The behavior analyst who oversees the behavior interventionist in our 6 buildings has been deployed there half-time through winter break. We added an additional para for that building for the Tier 3 support of those plans, as well as have the AEA going in for technical assistance. So I'll just share that with you.
And can we, just later get an update on just how it's going? I mean, I'm sure we'll hear about it either way, but it would be nice to hear how it's working and if that was successful.
Other comments or questions? We do need to vote on.
Yeah, just a couple wrap-ups.
Yep.
At the DPO presentation in the evening, I know there were some questions submitted to you. Are those being answered, and are those being sent out to the community?
They're being answered. Sorry. DPO asked me to submit them back to them so they could put them on their Facebook page.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. And the questions that I submitted in April, are we working toward getting those answered at some point in time?
I think we'll have to check with Superintendent Murley on those.
Okay. And just one thing in the in your PowerPoint where it's physical confinement exclusion area slide, where the Iowa City Community School District is committed to a safe. I wish we had something stronger than just committed, and I don't know if it's resolved to maintain or something along those lines, but I just wish we had a little stronger language. Thank you.
I'd like to move.
Sorry, I apologize. Mine's slipping. We had a commenter from the audience. Can you also provide us with the when the seclusion rooms were put into all the schools, the dates when they were constructed, whether they're permanent or temporary, and give us a timeline on, just so we've got an accurate number that we know exactly where they are, when they were put in, the ones that are being removed, if they're being completely physically removed, or if they're being repurposed, something along those lines.
I would have to talk with Dwayne about. I don't have a schedule of when they were put in. I mean, I obviously wasn't here.
But if you could get that information for us, I'm sure Dwayne can provide it for us.
Some of those rooms have been in the district, though, since I started as a CPI trainer in 1994, and some of those rooms were already here, and we tried to, as a task force, come up with when those rooms, or when did we start putting those rooms into place, and we could not find the initial information on that.
To the best of our knowledge, they've been there since '94. That satisfies
me. Or before.
Yeah, or before, exactly.
And really the bigger question is when they're going to be retired.
Right.
I think that's the planning that we're going through right now.
Yes, we've committed that before the next school year starts, that they will be. But the exact schedule is going to be figured out with staff in buildings, because we just really need to make sure that those staff that you're talking about who serve kids with high levels of behavior, that we don't just pull the rug out from under them, especially with plans that we've already got in place, that they just simply could not serve. They would be out of compliance if we did. So we have to make sure that they're involved in that conversation, and that we don't just from our office make a plan to take out a bunch of rooms when we don't know what's needed at that site yet.
I will move that we approve the Beth Steenwick contract.
I second that.
Kim, ready for a vote?
Online voting is open.
Not for me.
Me neither.
We may have to do a roll call vote. We
Pick
may
out
have sat
after
idle
a
for
certain
too long. Rotland.
Aye.
Bressler.
Aye.
Godwin.
Aye.
Clausen.
Aye.
Malone.
Aye.
Eyestone.
Aye.
Hemingway.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Lisa. You could provide us the dates for when the task force meets so that we can make sure to get that onto the board agenda as a follow-up on that quarterly basis. So thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation.
Yeah,
tonight.
and the notes will always be provided to you, too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to Extended Learning Program Self-Study.
And feel free, board members, to tell me if this is not okay. I am not married to this idea, but given the time and the other items we have to cover. Is this something we would want to potentially move to the next agenda? Is this time sensitive? Do we have anybody that's come specifically for this item that wouldn't be here otherwise?
Our coordinator for the early learning, or the extended learning program is here.
And has been here, okay.
Sure.
Out of
Sure.
respect for that person's time, we'll go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, as you know, all of our curriculum areas go under a review every 8 years. So the extended learning program is one of those areas, and they went under review it's usually a 2-year process. So the first year they survey parents, students, staff members to get information and input about the extended learning program. And then the second year they have a committee made, again, of parents and students and community members, a board member, administrators, staff members on the committee to also give us input. And then we end up with a report that follows this format that you have there, which includes the mission and belief statements. Then it centers on our strengths and our limitations of the program. And then it culminates really in an action plan. So then this is the action plan that the curriculum committee then brings forth for the next 7 years until their next review. So some of the highlights of the action plan I just wanted to mention. 3 of the things that we're really focused on strongly are the ELP identification process. We know that we identify more students in Iowa City than the state average, than a national average, but still we're not reaching all of our subgroups. So we really want to look at our identification procedures and see if we can address the disproportionality that we see in our ELP program. And we're having a committee meet to work on that this year. Second thing we're really looking at is professional development. We know that the needs of all talented and gifted students can't be met just by our ELP staff. They have to be met within the classroom as well. So we're looking at ways that we can provide better professional development to our general education teachers. And we have a small committee who's also participating in a state pilot that's addressing, through the MTSS process, what can we do as a district to address the learners that are exceeding our standards and our classroom expectations as they sit. And then the third area that we're really looking at are the social and emotional needs of our gifted students. And that's something that we really are focused on trying to work better with our counselors to help them prepare. We had a really nice session at our last professional development day where we brought in a consultant from the Bell and Blank Center to work with our teachers of honors students, because sometimes honor students get to that point and they start to struggle and they've never struggled before and they don't know how to handle that. So looking at the emotional concerns of our students as well. So those are kind of the 3 big areas, but you'll see in the review kind of all of the areas that we hope to accomplish in the next several years.
Question from me, I think this is fantastic. One of the questions I have is what's driving the recommendations and action steps in terms of concrete outcomes? Do you have targets that you're trying to accomplish? Or a certain number of students that you're trying to get into ELP? Are you trying to, what if you get all these action plans done successfully, what does it look like in the district?
Sure. Well, part of the identification then is to really look at our disproportionality. So that's something we certainly would like to address and make sure that students have an equitable chance of participating in our extended learning program. So that's one measurable outcome. The other outcomes I think we will end up seeing as students' needs are better met, and then when we go through this review process again and we survey staff, survey our students, we obviously hope to see a change in that. But as we go through all of our processes and all of our plans, we hope to get formative data back from people that we're impacting as well to address that. So it's a process, and it's not maybe scientific, but it is our attempt to try to make sure that every curriculum area goes through a review process and stops and reflects and says, where are we, where do we want to be, how do we get there better?
Diane, could you talk a bit about how English language learner students are included in the evaluation for inclusion in ELP?
Sure, and I don't know if Julie has any more that she can add to that, but that is certainly a population that we are not identifying as high as we probably should. So we're looking at alternative identification measures that we might be able to use with those students that aren't as language specific.
What, like, have an example of that?
Julie, would you want to talk about?
Well, we are
Okay. You may.
When we do our second grade enrichment, we are now screening every second grader, and that is offered in Spanish also. So we're at least making some progress of offering assessments in different languages. We're also working with our ELL teachers to help us to identify kids in the classroom that they see that are probably gifted, but we are not getting to them because our assessments don't get to them. So we're working in conjunction with our ELL teachers. We're getting some assessments in different languages. So we're trying to go out there and at least spread our net a little bit wider.
And so you added Spanish, and then will you plan to add more, see how that, add more languages as we go, or?
That's what we're hoping. I have the HMH representative coming, actually, what day is today? Thursday, to talk to us and see how we can get more languages involved and get out to more kids.
Great.
I attended a little presentation by someone from Bell and Blanc earlier this fall, and a lot of the conversation at that revolved around specifically availability of programming for the youngest kids, that K through 3 kind of range. That it sounds like there's efforts to identify kids at that age, but there isn't a lot of programming around ELP for kids of that age. Can you speak to that identification process and whatever programming there is for, that kind of young age group?
Well, our K2 program is where our ELP teachers actually go into the classroom and they do a lesson. And we do it on different focuses, like we might do visual spatial one semester, we might do math another semester, we might do language arts in there somehow also. We change them throughout a 2-year cycle. We're trying to look at strengths and different strengths that younger kids have, because it's very hard to identify where their strengths are at this time when they're K1, 2. So the teachers go into the classroom, they will identify some kids that have strengths in whatever area we're doing at that time, and then they will start pulling those kids once a week. So right now we have K1, 2 classes being pulled once a week at every school. Our third graders then go in through the process where we screen them in second grade. We're looking at the high end, and then we'll give them the full assessment and full battery assessment, and then they will start the real ELP qualified program in third grade.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Well, when we looking in the program evaluation and under limitations, programs, improvements, plans, while valued, may be limited by budget constraints. That's time and money. We're short on both. Are you funded to what you would like, or where do you see gaps? And other thing I'll throw in is that when I look at the students in our areas where I'm assuming we're looking to increase our black students, our Hispanic students, our Asian students. Our black students only take the ACT at a percentage of 7.5%. That's ridiculously low. What on the time and money? What can you put in on that?
So, talented and gifted funds, unfortunately, are not generated by the numbers of students whom you identify. So because in Iowa City we tend to identify a higher proportion of our students than the state or than national, as I had said, it doesn't mean that we get additional funds for those students. Special education, if you identify more students, you get more funds. ELL students, you get more funds. ELP, not. So we are limited with the amount of funds that are supposed to serve kind of a average set of population, when in Iowa City we feel we have a lot of students who actually meet the criteria. So that's why services may seem to be a little thinner, or we have more students in larger groups that are receiving the services than maybe some other communities might be able to do. That's one of the reasons why I guess budget really impacts the level of service we're able to provide.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, thank you for your comments and presentation tonight and material. We can move to voluntary transfers. I don't know, Matt or Steve?
Sure, thanks. So if you look at the memo I prepared there for you, I tried to highlight what I thought were the 3 outstanding questions to allow us to start processing or communicating to families about voluntary transfers. Last year we used a December 1st deadline. We know we'd probably need to look at a little bit different deadline since it is already November 14th. So we could push that back to winter break, knowing our high schools do want to start scheduling quickly after winter break, so we would need to do something relatively soon. But based on some of the direction you give us here tonight, we feel like we could communicate that out pretty quick and start collecting those transfers. So I won't reread the memo to you there, but I think the 3 big questions are really surrounding Liberty High School and how to treat students, freshmen, open enrolled, or that have currently been zoned to Liberty High. They're moving forward. So I'd open it up to any questions and I guess let you guys have the conversation and give us direction from there.
I'll just start.
Oh.
If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
My personal feeling, and I said this, I believe, the last time we had this discussion, I'd really like to get 4 full classes through Liberty for one time before we start allowing kids to go in and out of there to other schools. And really, I'd just like to set those boundaries like we did, stay true to them, let the kids go through there, and just get that familiarity with the school. I think that will grow. Stay with the same process we have for the junior highs, where the Kirkwood kids can choose to stay at Northwest or North Central, and Alexandria kids could choose to stay at Southeast or go to Northwest. Just my personal feeling. I can expand on that, but I think we had this discussion quite lengthy last year, and that's just my view. So.
I was going to go ahead and make a motion that we close Liberty High School for open enrollment and voluntary transfers for the class of 2021 and younger, making exceptions for hardships.
Second.
And just for the new board members, this would be consistent with the same class that we chose last year. The 9th grade class would be the class of 2021.
Is that enrollment going in
What's that?
or out or both?
For open enrollment. Oh.
Into.
Just into.
I was just trying to do the math
open
in my head.
enrollment and voluntary transfer. Liberty would be closed. Only Liberty.
In and out?
Voluntary transfer would be in.
Voluntary transfers.
So Director Rowland, you're saying as we had that current decision for the freshmen this year, that's the class of 2021. So you're saying that class and then
younger.
Younger. So moving forward.
So that we wouldn't have to revisit this every year, and it would just be until further change.
Until it's changed by the board at that time.
Yeah. And yes, just to clarify, close Liberty High School for open enrollment in and voluntary transfer in for the class of 2021 and younger, making exceptions for hardships.
And I guess the question that maybe we had and what we've done in the past is that those kids were also not allowed to transfer out.
This motion would not apply to kids wanting to transfer out.
Okay. I will not vote for that reason, I guess. We've not allowed, if we don't enforce it both ways, I think that we're just going back for certain kids to having no boundaries, really.
Because I have different concerns in the short term and the long term on the in and the out. I know that having a kid there and gone through some of that process as we were opening it, looking at what curriculum we can have there, what course offerings, it was a struggle with it not being a full school and having a small number there that couldn't quite offer everything they wanted to. And so in the short term, while we're not full, having a few more kids there I see as a good thing. But then in the long term, we're going to be over capacity well before it gets its addition, which is a whole other story we'll talk about later, right? That I'd be leery to have anything too permanent put on there at the same time. So I guess I'm riding the fence a little bit I'd be more concerned today of people leaving Liberty than people going in, because today there's room there. Very shortly, I'd be more concerned the other way around. So that's just some food for thought, and I didn't really land anywhere, but it's kind of where my head's spinning around right now.
But the room is at the upper grade levels, right? And Lori's motion is actually just for the lower grade levels. Okay.
But there's physical space there still, too, right? I mean,
But when you think of the sections, those freshman, sophomore classes aren't probably going to be the same classes that the junior, seniors are taking. There might be some overlap, but a lot of junior, senior classes are just junior, senior classes.
True.
So allowing kids to transfer in for junior, senior does increase the course offering, and this would be consistent with that.
How quickly is that going to be full?
Well, the stated capacity of 1,000, I think, will be there next year. And the year after that, it'll be easily 1,200.
I mean, that's kind of my concern is, are we going to kind of create a capacity problem in the next couple of years because we have, so I'd like to know, how many people are we thinking? And I know that's probably impossible to project, but if we're not going to have capacity by the time we get, I mean, that is my concern, is that it's going to be too full. And we've created a policy that doesn't allow us, obviously we can change our policies, but doesn't allow us some flexibility to, if that happens.
I guess to backpedal from my statement, right? Obviously, it's a little late from this year. I mean, we could have mid-year transfers, but that's less likely. And like I said, by next year, it'll have a pretty good contingent. 3 full classes, and the senior class will be, roughly a third of a full size. So it's still going to be a pretty big school at that point. Like Paul, I think I'd like to make sure that whatever decision we're making now at least speaks to people opting out as well, or transferring out. I don't know if we have a second motion, or we amend it to include both sides to it, or I don't know where other people feel on that part, but I think we need to address both directions tonight.
I agree. I think we need something that addresses both directions. I'm not comfortable at this point with just what the motion is on the table.
Okay. And so are you saying you want the motion to be amended to go both ways, or are you saying that the motion isn't clear?
She's saying she wants it, I think,
Okay.
I'm speaking for you, but to be amended.
And I'm just going to tell you where I'm coming from on that. This year we have, and I would need to look at the numbers, about 70 capstone kids that are from Wickham that are at North Central. And if we allow them to transfer into Liberty, we are very likely to start a trend of those kids just continuing to go through that path into Liberty and probably not making the transition into Northwest. And there are some kids that chose this year to go to Northwest for 7th grade. There are some kids that are Wickham kids that chose to voluntary transfer into North Central that will probably stay there for 8th grade next year. And again, if this is open for transfer, they will probably continue on to Liberty because that's what all the other North Central kids are doing. So the purpose of this is to allow those, we'll call them 60 kids, I don't know, it might be more than that, to be on the path to West and Northwest instead of following the path with their classmates that they voluntarily transferred into North Central High with.
I'm just going to go back to what I talked about earlier. If we do that, you're picking one school and saying, it's okay if you go over here now, which we changed the boundaries specifically so that we could have some of those kids integrated in with other kids at another school. But you're saying, so it's okay for you guys to leave, and we're going to take these other kids from Wickham into Liberty area. I guess I just have an issue with that.
She said the other way around. She wants those Wickham kids to go to West and make sure they're at West and not at Liberty.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what her motion does.
Right.
But it also allows the Kirkwood kids to go to West.
Right.
Right.
Right. So right now what we're saying is Kirkwood kids don't have a choice, or Alexander.
At the high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I do see how both motions, adding the in or out does solve your problem as far as not allowing them to transfer in. And then the out, I mean, for me, that question's a lot about capacity. I mean, I want to be fair to folks. And
I understand.
I think it's important to, it is important, we want to have balanced schools. I get it. I think that the chances of a lot of the folks we're talking about in the Kirkwood neighborhood being able to make that transfer are more limited than maybe the folks in the Wickham neighborhood to be able to provide their own transportation. And I think that's a barrier that's there that kind of keeps them, getting bused up to Liberty, but again, not necessarily, right? They can take a city bus or walk.
Yeah, I think that probably the kids that would be asking to voluntary transfer out of Liberty would, by definition, be people that can provide their own transportation. So it's not going to impact the socioeconomic balance that we were aiming for with that boundary change. It actually would be helping the socioeconomic balance. Because right now, Northwest Junior High has the highest FRL of any of our secondary schools. And so that's an example of what will happen if we allow kids to both transfer. Okay, now I'm not making sense. If we force kids, forget what I'm saying is that it will help West High, I believe, if we allow the kids that have means to transfer out of Liberty, as opposed to requiring the kids of means to go to Liberty, if that makes sense.
It does. I just don't get where you're getting the kids that are going to go to West from Liberty from.
They would be kids who could provide their own transportation.
I know, but what kids are you taking out of Liberty that are going to go to West?
Those that maybe have siblings that are at West. They have older siblings that are already going to West, and they'd like to be able to follow the path so they can ride to school with their siblings. There's not a lot of them, but there are a few.
We've gotten correspondence to situations that Lori's alluding to.
Right, and so when you give a reason, then if that's going to be a reason to opt out. Like, where do you stop? Where do your reasons stop then?
Laura, you said an exception of hardship. No, so people can appeal these decisions?
Yep.
And they can appeal to the board, and we can make individual.
So they could bring that.
They could bring it.
If they have
I definitely
a sibling.
empathize. People who have siblings there who have, that to me is just, I don't care what your income is or what level. That's just keeping your family together, and it makes a lot of sense. And I don't like splitting those up, especially if it's handfuls. If it's going to be 6 cases a year, that to me.
Just for a frame of reference, the exceptions are those that apply to open enrollment. So if you have an issue that is subject to an open enrollment exception, those are the exceptions that we use for voluntary transfer. Keeping your family in the same school is not an open enrollment exception, so that is not a hardship.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
As it's currently
can
defined.
further appreciate more than hardship, because I think as on an individual case, that is a mitigating circumstance I would consider. But I understand not wanting to go, have a floodgate open either way and really change what we're trying to do with our policy. But I think on those individual circumstances, and I guess if people can appeal that, they can bring it to the board, and then we can make a decision on a case-by-case basis. And I would hope there would be few, not very many of those, that it's a dozen or so.
Well, by definition, Liberty attendance zone is a long ways from West, so everybody pretty much that's going to West that would be living in Liberty would have to have their own transportation. There might be a few Kirkwood kids that, I don't know if there's any that are less than 3 miles from West. Maybe a few.
Yeah.
There are a few.
There are a lot of Kirkwood kids.
There are a few.
The only thing I would and totally respect your opinion, Director Clausen, I would just ask you to consider the families that had to make a decision based on the guidance from board last year, right? So there would have been some of those families in a sibling split situation that wasn't an issue for them, so they may have made a family life decision, based on that guidance. And so anything you do different based on that, know that there's a group of people that were already affected by that for 1 year, that it may feel good for families in that situation now that haven't had to potentially tackle that issue, but if they decided to send both of their students to Liberty to avoid that, and now they're given that flexibility, I could just anticipate some feedback going that way about, whether you were responsible for that decision and you're new to the board now, that's still going to feel to them like the board's changed the game on them, 1 year later. So just trying to think about maybe people that had to make a decision a year ago or were forced into a spot, and then any kind of change in what that's going to feel like to them. And, because we'll hear that concern, about, okay, so now you've moved the needle on us a little bit.
Consistency is something we do hear about, and so I think that's from my opinion, being consistent from what we've said so far and what we're going to be doing going forward is an important consideration. So we have a motion on the table. Is there a desire to amend it, or are we going to vote on that as moved?
I'll go ahead and put it forward to a vote.
Can you please remind me first what year were the classes? I have the motion to close Liberty for open enrollment in and voluntary transfers in for classes
2021 and younger.
Okay. With the
Being
exception
exceptions
of
for
hardships.
hardships. Yeah.
Okay.
There was a second.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Clausen, Eystone, and Hemingway voting yea, and Directors Ressler, Godwin, and Malone voting nay.
Okay, any other topic on voluntary transfers?
I just wanted to double check here, but I think that covered all three of the questions the way that motion was stated. So I think if we run into issues, we would come back and report to you, but we feel like we have a process to communicate out transfer applications and how that goes, and that gives us good guidance here approaching the March 1st deadline for open enrollment applications too, and how to handle those. So thank you.
I would just really want to keep a close eye on the folks going out. I know you talk about, you may have a senior and a sophomore and they want to go to West, and I have, friends that live in my neighborhood that have that situation, and I totally get that. But they may also have an 8th grader and a 6th grader and a 4th grader. At some point, you got to be like, all right, you need to go to your right school, and you can't just say, oh, it's only a couple, because it may be a couple today and it may be a lot tomorrow. So I did vote in favor of closing the in, but I'd still think we need to look at the out and make sure that we don't create a problem there. And I don't want this just to be the end of it, but it may be the end of it for this school, for the next school year.
Could you report back to us the numbers that I don't know if you're going to change your deadline, but the number of applications that you get, or maybe after you've processed them, just so we know what we're looking at, and then next year we could compare the number and see what the trend is?
Right, I guess I would just ask to be clear on that then. So we would still process applications for out, approve those, and then you'd like to just have that data back to you about what we approved and what that number was, or are you asking to have that back prior to the approval of those applications?
Speaking for myself, I would be saying you've been given direction. I don't think it would be fair to change that when families have been told this is
right
what the rule is, and then
and I would have
we
assumed
can
it
watch
first,
the
so I
trend.
just want to make sure that
we would watch the trend. Next year, we'd be if you provide us the information this year, then we can refer back to that next year.
Right.
That's the reason I asked to have it reported, because I like.
So
to be able
yep,
to
we can bring that
refer
back in the spring to say this is how many we approved out of Liberty High School for the 18-19 school year. Yep.
Thank you.
Next fall.
If need be, we can have that conversation.
Okay, we're going to move into operational work. I am going to take a look at the agenda and the time, and I know that we've got the quarterly financial report, we've got the bid receipt for the GO school bonds, we've got the facilities master plan discussion, which is likely to be a lot of questions and comments, and then we do need to do a summary of Appendix 9, and then the items withdrawn from consent. So I just would ask the question, some of these things do require actions, and we should probably focus on those. Is there anything that of those remaining items that we feel like could be tabled to the next meeting, or do we just power on? I know we've got till 10 o'clock, but I would look for, some of these things probably can go quickly. Craig, the financial report, unless folks have a lot of questions.
I think we can run through these pretty quickly.
Let's do.
All right, Leslie?
The quarterly report, this is the first time that most of you have seen this as new directors. I would refer you to the executive summary page as your focus. There are a couple pages where the district information is presented in context with where we rank according to the state, but those are dependent upon when reports are and information is summarized from other districts across the state. So they may be from different fiscal years, and we will update those on future quarterly reports as that information becomes available. As you look to the last couple of pages, I would highlight a couple things. On the revenue side, our primary sources of revenue are property taxes and state aid. Property taxes are primarily received in the district in October and April, which makes sense as to when you pay them personally. And so then we collect them in the succeeding months. So they will spike in the next quarter because we will have October reflected in that quarter, and it'll look more like about half a year worth of property taxes at the next quarter. Right now it looks pretty sparse. State aid is received that includes our state aid and categoricals for things like class size, the professional development, the preschool, teacher quality, and TSS dollars. That makes up the other approximately 50% of our budget. Those are received in September through June. So you've only got 1/10 of the payments reflected here, and that's why those numbers sit at 10%. The other numbers will vary some, and they will level out as the year goes along. On the expenditure side, as you know, most of our costs are tied up in our personnel costs, about 84 to 85%. A large portion of that is in the teachers, paras, building secretary area. Those people are paid their first check for the contract year starting in September, so we only have 1/12 of their contract reflected in this quarter report. Again, those will level out to what looks like a more reasonable percentage as the year goes along, but that's why we present year over year so you can see those comparatively from the prior years. Again, draw your attention to the focus on the executive summary, and Craig will be sharing more information of the budget meeting I think that you have scheduled for next week as to how all of this information comes together throughout the year.
Thank you. Comments, questions from board members?
No actions required on your part.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that quick summary.
Good report. A lot of information.
Bid receipt for general obligation school bonds, Series 2017C. I think we do have an action on this one. Do you want to give a quick summary, Craig?
Today, the district
Leslie?
sold approximately $59 million, received bids for approximately $59 million of general obligation school bonds. Suzanne Gerlach from PFM is here to describe that process, the successful results of those bids, and give you the recommendation.
So first, I would like to congratulate the Iowa City School District as being the only AAA rated school district in the state of Iowa. So congratulations. That is the highest credit rating that Moody's offers. As you can imagine, it was a very robust conversation on the heels of a $191 million general obligation referendum successfully passing. But we were able to demonstrate the strong fiscal management you have here at the district. There was a lot of discussion about the growth that's coming, the stable managed growth, the financial management, and then, of course, the very diverse tax base and the stable economy kind of revolving around the University of Iowa. So it was a very positive discussion, and the AAA was affirmed with a stable outlook. So that means they don't intend to change the rating for, they think, within 2 years. So that's very positive. So we came to the market today with $58,955,000 of general obligation school bonds. We received 6 bids from over 44 firms. So when an underwriter submits a bid, they put together what they call a selling group or a syndicate. And so the 6 bids we received represented 44 different firms across the United States. So that's tremendous interest. The pages are just the list of all the different participating firms of all size and scope all over the nation. We measure the success or the cost, right, on a true interest cost or a TIC basis. The TICs ranged from 2.69% to 2.76%. And what we look for is how close those bids are together to know how well we priced and if the market agreed on what a good price was for the district. The first 4 bids were within 0.01% of each other, so that's fantastic. That means the market agreed that this was a strong credit and there was a strong competition to be the winner today. Pricing with the AAA credit, the district sold 20-year bonds, so over the term of the yield curve on average 30 basis points, which is what we'd expect for 20-year bonds for AAA rating. When I say basis points, I mean 0.01%, so 30 basis points is 0.3%. Over the AAA index. The market, I don't know the headlines, you can kind of tell there's been a little bit of turmoil. We had a new Fed rate chair, we have some tax reform bills coming out, so there has been some uncertainty in the market, but rates held very steady and we're within 5 basis points of where we started in October. So we're right on plan, which is what we want to see. So you'll notice that there's a note at the bottom of page 1 of the bid tabulation. We did resize, not the par amount of the bonds. We resized the different annual maturity amounts because we have a tax rate target. When we brought forth the master plan, and when you did the referendum, we had a tax rate that we told the taxpayers, and we're maintaining the $1.95 tax rate and the debt service levy that we had planned. And so we ended up restructuring and making sure that we were within the $1.95 for the tax rate. So we did end up pushing a little bit of the principal back. So that's why there's just a note about some resizing. In addition, with the pricing, there was a premium involved. And so that means there's additional cash brought forward when the coupon that they're asking for is higher than what the credit rating would be. So a 5% coupon should get $1.25, or $1.25, and so they have to pay you 105% cash up front for that sort of premium. And so we did take the premium. That'll go right to the project fund, and that is included in the resizing here as well. Let's see, and this first 2017 C bonds, this will fund all of the projects that are part of the master facility plan through June 30th, 2019. So, any questions for me? We're very pleased with the rates today, so congratulations on a very successful sale. Anything else to add, Craig?
I don't believe so. As you know, this is our first step. And I know you're going to possibly discuss acceleration or not acceleration, but this isn't tied to that in any way. We'll be coming back to you in 19 sometime. If you choose to accelerate, we may need to sell a little more in that second sale or move it up a couple of months, but it'll be in 19 like we told you and the voters originally anyway. So this first sale, we're just really pleased and excited that we were able to achieve such a good national interest. We had some New York brokerage firms, some very sophisticated voters interested in this debt. This time around, it's extremely competitive, and we were just able to achieve an outstanding rate. And I want to thank Suzanne for all her efforts and work in this, and working with Moody's for our credit rating and that kind of things also. So.
Yeah, Craig brought a really good point. That's something I didn't mention. Jefferies has not been a winner of a competitive sale or even a bidder. And Wells Fargo, I think those are 2 bidders that came out of the woodworks and said, we want Iowa City credit. We want to be part of this transaction. And we haven't seen them even bidding actively in Iowa, I don't think at all this year. Maybe early in the spring at the latest. So that's fantastic.
I move that we approve the resolution approving the sale of the general obligation bonds as presented by PFM today.
I'll second that.
Kim, please, open to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with Directors Rotland, Ressler, Godwin, Clausen, Malone, and Eystone voting yea, and Director Hemingway voting nay.
Thank you very much, Kim. Facilities Master Plan discussion. Are
So
these
we'll-
the same materials that were presented
Exactly. I
in
was
the
just
work
going to tell you
session?
that. Everything that's on the agenda are the attachments that were included in the work session. And so this was an opportunity that was requested at the work session to have a follow-up discussion at the board table.
I I think I was one that actually requested it, so I should probably at least get this party started. I was hoping that we could have, a discussion here at the board table. It's a little more public, more people are going to get a chance to see it and kind of hear some of our thoughts and concerns and just, anything that we need to kind of work our heads around and give the public a chance to speak at it earlier today. And then we're going to have some more discussion on it for sure. I think one of the big takeaways that I had from our work session when we were discussing this is that a general thought of acceleration is a good thing to save money and get kids into renovated spaces faster is a good thing. As a big picture giant plan with everything laid out over the next several years, that's a bit much. I think that's where we all kind of landed, and there was a whole lot of in between there. And the point that I keep coming back to in my head, looking at, as the whole thing, is that, as we went through the whole campaign for the bond, and as much as people tried to divorce the bond from the FMP, that I heard a lot of times that we're not voting on the FMP, we're voting on the funding source. That's what the vote's about. But I also heard that, we can't just come back quickly with a new bond, which I agreed with. I didn't think we can come back with one without drastically changing the FMP. And we didn't want to do that because the plan was created with these hundreds of hours of input from the community, which is absolutely true. This feels like it would be potentially drastically changing that FMP without getting that amount of input, if you look at it as a whole. I think what our discussion should be more focused on is kind of the immediate needs, immediate things that maybe we could look at doing that's not quite as broad scoped, and revisit everything else after that. I think that I've heard other people say that, the couple that have moved up, Tate and Alexander, seem to be kind of the no-brainers. I've heard that from, outside community folks as well. But everything else is kind of a toss-up. I've heard a lot of discussion amongst the board members, at that work session, things that are good and bad, and different community members speaking, well, I like this one and I like that one. And that's going to raise a whole lot of flags if we just start saying, all right, yeah, we're going with this giant acceleration plan. And I don't know that that was the expectation when you guys brought it forward either, was that here's this whole thing, it's all or nothing. And I think it is going to have to be somewhere in the middle, and where that lands is going to kind of be based on what everybody has to add to the conversation now. But that's why I wanted it to be just a more public conversation on it at the table, and here's that chance to do it.
I think that's a great summary, Sean. I think that, and that's what I've been hearing too. Alexander Tate are a no-brainer, but then from that, the conversation goes into a lot of different ways. And well, maybe we can look at this, and have we considered this? And my worry is that, we end up building, as the, I think one of the good things about the FMP is it can be flexible over time in response to circumstances on the ground. And I think we're going to lose a lot of that ability to respond to things that we may not be able to predict if we just go full bore ahead. However, I really appreciate saving the money. Saving the interest payments is big. But I don't know that I could approve a full thing right now tonight. I absolutely would approve Tate and Alexander moving up with.
Yeah, I would actually support the Tate and Alexander acceleration, and then for some of the other reasons others have commented, I think we need a bit more time to think through whether it's priorities. We've talked about boundary changes that may need to come into play as we think about balancing our schools. How does that have an effect in terms of the projects in the list and the priority of them? We have the, sorry, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's not enrollment projections, but the student potential analysis coming that perhaps could bring some additional data to bear that might cause us to reprioritize or scope some of the capacity questions a little bit differently. And so, but I also want to add that, so I'm also supporting Tate and Alexander to to move into this accelerated timeframe, but I'm also an advocate of defining a clean and clear process for very quickly moving through the analysis that I think we need to do to confirm the order and the scope of the projects on here. And so whether that's work sessions or, getting the data from the student potential analysis, I just want to understand what that process is. I want to be mindful of your timelines around construction. I know that that's a cyclical activity. I want to take advantage of that as much as we can, but I also want to have the confidence that we've gone into it with the proper analysis, the proper input from the community, and discussion, at the board table as well.
I would like to add that, yes, Tate and Alexander are no-brainers, but so are North Central and Southeast, because Southeast is the building where we have the most students in unair-conditioned spaces. It's got a mechanical system that is in dire need of updating. North Central has a different problem, and it's the growth problem that we have in North Liberty, and we need the classrooms sooner than later. So those two, for us, were also no-brainers because they have different reasons, but that's why we also selected those two to move up a little bit. So it wasn't just a willy-nilly, let's pick the junior high. Those two buildings have severe needs, or will have in the very near future. Just adding that for your conversation.
And going forward tonight with what it sounds like, approving accelerated plan for just Tate and Alexander, wouldn't that change the amount of savings we would have if it was just those two schools? So, we don't have that information on what that looks like when it comes down to the numbers. So, that's fine to have that discussion and to consider some of the things that Dwayne just raised on why Southeast and North Central would also be no-brainers. But, tonight I don't think we have information we need in order to sort of pick out certain schools that we feel are no-brainers to accelerate without getting that financial feedback. Because, that changes. Right now, we have this one model.
I agree. I absolutely had no intention of voting on accelerating anything tonight. I think as we talked in the work session, we were hoping by the second meeting in November, our next meeting, that we would have a decision made. And I think what I would like to get done tonight is to say, here's a couple potential plans that maybe we want to look at that we can then have that information to then vote on at our next meeting. And Ruthina's right. I think we need to know, okay, if we just move up two things, what does that look like? Does that, obviously it helps get the projects done faster. Does it really save us money? Does it not save us money and that kind of stuff?
You do have a chart in your packet that describes each project and the effect that it has on inflation savings. And that you do have that in front of you. So if you wanted to just
do they not? I guess maybe I'm making assumptions. I kind of assume that you'd get some bigger net gain as you kind of put more things together in an accelerator process. Is it just solely based project by project?
It's just project by project as you move them forward. You're taking advantage of the construction inflation that's built into your your master plan now. And as you move a project forward, you're not going to have to accommodate that inflation, and so that's a potential savings for you. So it is a project by project.
And we discussed the need for additional staff, right, to kind of help manage these projects. Is there a tipping point where, yes, we'd need that, and no, we wouldn't need that? Because that's a separate cost from that's not necessarily project-based.
To answer your question, yes, and I don't know where that's at.
I'll be brief. I think you all know that I'm for acceleration. And just to touch on a couple things, one thing that you said, Sean, was that we're changing the facility master plan. We might be changing the timeline, but the projects are all remaining the same, so the plan itself is not necessarily changing. And when I look at savings-wise, dollar-wise, if we're talking things that are no-brainers, trust me, I hear it every day when I pick up my kid from Lemmy. Was Lemmy going to get accelerated? And that's the one with the greatest dollar savings. So, it's $837,000 in inflation alone. So I picked that one out just because it has the highest number, but not because it's necessarily, the most dire need, but that's a huge savings on our part. And so, that's a discussion we're going to have is when we start talking about things that are no-brainers, I guess.
Very fair point. So I'm sort of back to my original question. If we're looking to have a vote on acceleration at our next board meeting, what do we need to do as a board to ensure we're prepared for that vote, so that we can have, a process that helps us get to that point? I'm asking for ideas and input there.
As you're thinking about that, just a couple things to add. So remember that we talked about this as being bookends, that we have the adopted facility master plan. It's already on track. We know when it is. We've started the borrowing for it. We're ready to move those projects forward. And what we brought you at that last work session was, if we could accelerate it to the greatest extent possible, what would it look like? So we had that conversation that this is really the other bookend. It's as fast as you can go, given the capacity that we have and the ability to make the changes with the staffing that would be required to do that. So, to Sean's point, can we come in between? Absolutely. It winds up then being a couple of issues. One of them is the cyclical process of construction, which is one of the reasons we were pushing for that conversation at the last one, because we need to be ready to go in the spring if we are going to accelerate any projects this year. I think JP might have raised it, if I can remember, if I can rewind my brain. Do you have to do an entire plan? No, what we really need at this point in time is, are there projects that you want to accelerate for next spring? And certainly we can make that decision, but then all the rest of them bear lots of opportunity for us to come back through work sessions, further scrutiny, look at them, make that decision about priorities and which ones fall where. And then just a couple other things to remind you. One of the things that we looked at when we said what are our conditions for acceleration, one of the big ones that we asked ourselves was what projects could be done without disturbing students in place. So you see things like Tate and Alexander, because that can be done while students are still in session in those schools without disrupting the regular education process in there. And then the last one I'd leave you with, just because I don't want it to fall off the radar, is we had the conversation about one of the reasons that we brought this to you was the feedback that we were hearing from the community. And one of the resounding things that we have heard over the course of the last 9 months is what happens next at City High School. And that is one project that I would definitely ask you to give strong consideration to. It doesn't change the timeline for the project. It pushes the design phase up 6 months. That gives us the opportunity to get an advanced start on that. One of the things that we really want to do is have extensive community engagement as part of that process. Mm-hmm. So the sooner we start that, the more community engagement we would have. So that would be one that I would ask you to think about putting in the mix.
I meant to add that one on because we actually asked for that at our
do we need to vote on that? I thought we had already said proceed with design.
We were going to wait till we got here.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the other circumstance that kind of drives this accelerated plan is the use of transitional housing. So we have a 10-plex, and we had the original facility master plan based on the buildings that need that temporary housing during construction. And those projects, like the Lemmys, were set out in order of priorities because that building had to be moved from site to site. Well, last year, due to the RAM and other considerations, we also ended up purchasing a 6-plex that sits at Lucas. We're going to be able to, within a year or two, be able to move that unit and use that as an additional transitional housing unit. That's the reason Lemmy was moved up, because we have this 6-plex. That's the reason Shimmick was moved up in this process. If you go through there and follow that schedule, but that had a direct bearing on how many years we can move those projects up and why they're in the order they're in, so that we can use the 10-plex and the 6-plex. So there's a reason for why some of those buildings are where they're at.
Well, I'm not sold on the accelerated plan at all. And I think looking at Lincoln should give us all pause because we may have gotten ahead of ourselves in that project with problems with grading and a slope. And that may affect the timeline and everything that way. And there may be some added costs for the fact that, we didn't have it all sorted out before we dove head first into it. And I'm concerned too that, this accelerated plan in a time when our country is rebuilding from 2 hurricanes and the west coast of the country burning up, that we could be in demand, going into purchasing materials that are inflated in a short period of time just because of lack of demand, and if we did it on a more gradual aspect, it might be less. And I don't know that we've been provided with any that we can document any discussions with the university as far as their construction and what's going on there, and all the discussion that's going on with the city. And there's a certain capacity of our community with concrete and materials. So and we went to the voters with a plan, and now we're changing it. And I went to every single forum this last go-around, and I heard unanimity and 3 readings and community input and transparency and everybody being involved, and I just want to make sure that we are. And I think too, we don't have all the data we need, with construction and things in other areas, just as far as developments and things like that. And on our consent agenda tonight, we've got a survey that isn't going to be available until March, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. So, yeah, I'm concerned with voting on anything accelerating at this point until we had an opportunity to really get some weigh-in from the community, because I don't think the community's paying attention to it right at the moment. And I think that that's a problem if we don't take the time to bring them up along with us.
Just a point for you to consider, Director Hemingway, is that construction inflation, in my 42 years, I've never seen it go down. It always stays the same or goes up. And I don't disagree that the hurricanes aren't going to have a significant influence on the cost of materials. But if you delay the projects because you're worried about inflation next year, 2 or 3 years down the road, it's going to be that plus more. So you're not going to offset that cost of inflation by delaying the projects. You actually need to take advantage of it sooner.
Inflation goes up and down.
In the construction industry, you very seldom see that go down. Matter of fact, I can't think of maybe 1 or 2 times it leveled off at 0, but it never actually decreased. And that's out there. I can get that for you.
I think you mentioned at the work session there was a document somewhere that listed the projects, or someone had done that analysis. You said, oh, that's kind of in there somewhere, where all the local construction and what's going on. I thought you'd kind of indicated that data might be around somewhere in.
We did that study in 2013.
Okay.
But I would say it's probably not real relevant. I think a lot's changed since then. I wouldn't depend on that data. You really need this student potential study. And if it's not on the timeline that you feel that you want it, say it's not, and we'll adjust it. I mean, that's just the proposed timeline. So
Get that report sooner?
You could. I'll have to check with them to see how much they're willing to accelerate it, but I bet they'll be willing to accelerate it maybe a month, if that's important to you. But we can't wait that long to have this decision made. You need to make this decision by the end of November, or we need to scrap the plan, and then you can take as much time as you want, but we won't be doing anything this next construction season.
So that's what I'm wondering if we can get to, is agree on those few projects that we want to accelerate. Mm-hmm. If there are quote-unquote no-brainers that we think make a lot of sense for whatever reason, get those into the pipeline, then take some additional time to look at the student potential and the savings and richer community input, look at boundary discussions. I don't know if those kinds of things affect anything in our F&P in terms of not the project scope, but the amount of capacity perhaps that we would be adding to a particular school. So I don't know if we can kind of thread this needle that way of getting some things into the pipeline that are quote unquote no-brainers or make a lot of sense or are low risk, high value to proceed within an accelerated way, and then take some additional time to do the deeper thought around the rest of the projects in the F&P. It's just to validate, the proper order, proper sequence, they had proper data.
And I know we have retreats scheduled for next week, and I don't know if it'd be worthwhile to make those work sessions and devote an hour or so to have this discussion, certainly before the next board meeting. But we already have some time planned, blocked out, and I certainly appreciate the visioning and all that big picture stuff. But if we can carve out some time, to just get this more discussion, ask some more. Dwayne, you just bringing up, the mechanical stuff at Southeast was like, yeah, that's something I wasn't thinking of coming into the meeting tonight. So I know we spent a lot of time on this, but clearly, we're not ready for a vote tonight. And if we don't have these discussions, I don't know if we will be in 2 weeks.
Yeah. I want us to be ready to have a vote on whether we are proceeding with acceleration or not at the next board meeting. So I would support using the next, I think it's next Monday, that we set aside for a board retreat. If we could make that a work session to have the conversation around which projects we want to put on the acceleration plan.
I think between now and then, too, we can certainly get a list of projects that are planned by the university and the city. Maybe talk to the planning director in North Liberty as well. And I'll do my best to find you a history of construction inflation over the past 20 years. See what I can find for you. So there's some documents there. I would tell you this, too. There's just a thought, and we can talk more next week, but there's a wave that goes through the trades. And that wave is, the beginning of the wave is the design work. You start the planning, you get through and you build it, and then you go through the trades till you finish a project. Like at Liberty, it was a wave. Well, the last few years in Iowa City, that wave has never receded. It stayed up there, and there's been a huge demand. Director Hemingway was right. There's been a lot of contractors come in from outside the city to do the work because the wave is up there. But, and this is more than anecdotal, I've had many, many architectural firms approach me in the last month, and they're looking for work. And so what does that tell you? There's a dip. The wave has finally receded. They're looking to do design work for future projects. So the time may be right to catch the wave. To use an old surfer term, you got to watch that wave and catch your ride. And the time is actually pretty good right now. So.
I did not peg you for a surfer, Dwayne.
Yeah, I know. And I tried it once, and that was good enough.
And I'm just going to say, Dwayne, with all due respect, they also know that we just passed a $191 million bond.
That helps,
so
too. Yeah.
Them coming to us isn't a huge surprise. One thing I want to just point out is that one thing that was sold to the voters in this vote was that it was going to bring local jobs. I heard that talked about. So that is something that I would like to maintain some integrity with. If accelerating means that we have all outside firms doing all the work, I want to know that. That's information I'd like you to bring back to us.
The other piece of that is that there are general contractors that have moved to town. Myron, for example, they did a lot of work for the university, and they're out of Minnesota and Wisconsin. Mortensen, they're big companies. But when they come to town, they don't bring all their subcontractors with them. They use local subcontractors. So even though it may be an out-of-state contractor or a contractor from Timbuktu in western Iowa, they're still using local tradespeople to do the work. You've got a lot of good companies here that do most of our work. AAA Mechanical, Merit Electric, I can go on and on. But just don't look at who that general is. Look at who they're using. And you'll find that most of the projects we've done have all used local subs. And I'd be more than happy to try and put together a list of how that's played out the last 4 years.
That would be helpful for the session on Monday. If you could bring that would
do our
be
best.
Appreciated. Thank you.
And just a heads up, you're going to the ISB convention in a few days, and you're going to be
tomorrow.
You're going to have architects and people all over you just because you're from Iowa City. So that adds to your point, Lori. You just be prepared.
Okay, so I think we're going to use our Monday session as a work session and work together with some additional data from Dwayne and come up with an approach for the next board meeting in the acceleration plan. And when we get to agenda setting, we'll make sure that the next board meeting has that item on it. Okay, in the interest of time, Appendix 9.
Thank you. We have 7 projects with their request tonight and 1 project update. The first one is West High. It's a Step 7 awarded bid. And this is for the culinary arts room at West High that we're going to use as a temporary kitchen during renovation and then turn over to the culinary arts program, so it's going to be a pretty nice room. We had a budget of $500,000. The bids, we got 3 bids. They ranged from $448,000 to $498,000. Low bid was $448,000 to by McComas Lucina, a local company. So we're very pleased. They're also doing the work at West High School right now, so they had an obvious advantage and probably wanted the job worse. But, you know, it fit into their schedule. Liberty High, we have a step 8 change request for $11,143. $3,900 plus of that was for code changes. That include changing the door and some fume hood work that the city fire marshal wanted. Then the district requested a little over $5,000 in work. We added a safety railing on a catwalk up above the auditorium, and we did some additional drywall work in the library. And we had some unforeseen electrical work of $1,700. The next project is roof management package 2, and this is for the softball press box at West High School, and it's a change order for $3,489. And then looking at the project, they had sliding doors, and it was obvious they weren't going to work. They need to be coiling doors, so that's what this request is for. Then we had a bid package number 1, which is putting coating on roofs and doing some minor repair work, and we discovered some wet insulation at Kirkwood and Grantwood that needed to be removed and replaced. So this change order was for $8,851. There's a safety and security request for Phase 5. We did some additional work, design work at Trek, Lemmy, Lucas, Southeast, and Kirkwood. And for that change, that design work was $22,000. There's another item for safety and security, Phase 6A, and I read the materials I had with me here tonight, and unless you got something different, I'm not prepared to recommend that. I would like you to defer that to the next meeting. I think there needs to be more documentation on that, so I'm asking you to defer that.
The Phase 6A, safety and security, Phase 6A?
Excuse me?
Is that the one you're asking us to defer?
6A.
Thank you.
Yes, I just can't in good faith recommend it until I get more information. And then the next one is for Weber. And we have a change request for $23,845, and that was to do the district requested some additional courtyard work. We did some concrete work there. And we also did some additional painting in spaces that weren't in the original contract. And we also added some additional acoustical ceiling tile for some that was damaged and needed to be repaired, not by the contractors, but just over time. And then the last one's a Lincoln update, which is not part of the recommendations, but I would move that, answer any questions you might have on those action items, and if you want more information or want to discuss Lincoln, I'm prepared to do that.
Can you go into greater detail on the Lincoln situation?
And
since we had consultants go in there and survey it and everything like that, how did we get this far along without recognizing the critical slope that obviously we're in right now?
All right, well, a little history. And Steve, can you pull up that attachment? Can you do that? I think it would be very helpful. Yeah, it's, I don't know how it's listed. If you pull up the item, I can tell you which one it is. Yeah, let's pull that one up. And scroll down. Yeah, keep going. I think this is helpful, so if you don't mind. Okay, that is a little more, Kristen, that'd be right there. There you go. Okay. First of all, we brought it to the city's attention that some slopes out there fell into what we call a critical slopes ordinance. And there's an ordinance in Iowa City that protects critical slopes, which are steep slopes, trees, and wetlands. And we recognize that there was part of this site that may fall into that. We started doing our investigative work and our design work. So I would credit our professional staff for doing that and having the ethics to do it, because we could have just slid by and I don't think anything would have happened. So I wanted to make that point. But if you look at this map, you'll see a green arc that goes from the top center down through the center of that project. That is what we call the toe of the bank. That's the bottom of the bank where it kind of levels off to the parking lot grade. That is where we feel that toe was back in the 50s, 60s, and even the early 70s before that parking lot was built. And when that parking lot was built, they actually cut back into the bank where that yellow area is. In that yellow area, and just above it, is where the slope was actually altered by man, not by Mother Nature. And Mother Nature had a slope like this, and when we did the parking lot, we ended up with a slope like this. So that threw us into that critical slope. Well, and further working with the city, by the way, the city's been great to work with. They've really been very helpful. There's a part of the ordinance that says if it's a natural slope, you have to show hardship to change that. And the reason they put that code in place was to prevent developers from going in and ravaging entire neighborhoods or with a development and ruining the natural beauty. Plus, it creates erosion issues for the city. So, but then it goes on to say that if it's been altered by man, which this one has, and we created the critical slope. We did, Mother Nature did, we did. We made it steeper. The district did when they put in the parking lot. Well, that throws us into a whole different code. It throws us into a zoning issue in which they call it an overlay. So they overlaid the zoning onto that spot, saying that this is an exception that the city can live with. We'll move forward. And the city staff supports it. That's a key part of it. They didn't necessarily when it was a critical slope if we didn't know if it was man-made or natural. If it had been natural, this hurdle would have been much tougher. But because we, the district, altered it from a flatter to a steeper slope because of the parking lot construction, which cut, if you look at that corner, cut into that bank, they're okay with it. And the other proof is, if you go to the next page, Kristen, I think I'd like to show you just two more, because I really think this will help make it clear. This picture right here shows the area in the outer pink dotted line for dash line. That critical slope is an area that's off the edge of that parking lot in the inside of that area. And what made the city realize that yes, indeed, this has been man-made, is that there are no trees in that area. If that had been Mother Nature's slope, there would have been more of these trees that would have propagated in that area. But that was changed back in the 70s and altered. So that in addition to the fact that the parking lot was there, we found some old drawings, convinced the city staffers, I believe, that yes, indeed, this is an altered area. And I don't know the next picture if it helps or not. Oh, just a second before you do that. There's also a black and white dash line from the building down through the center. There's a storm sewer that's attached to the roof drains on the building that exits down at the bottom of the hill. So obviously that bank was also altered when that storm line was put in. Next one, please. That's just another perspective. It shows the slope, the area that's been altered. I think we've satisfied the city. I don't think this is going to be an issue for us going forward. However, we still have to go to a planning and zoning meeting in December and then have city council action. Since I gave that everybody's for it, it's okay. We have met with the neighbors because the zoning request required that we have a good neighbor meeting. We had that last week or the week before. Every neighbor within 300 feet was notified, and I think they all showed up. It was a great meeting. We went through the planning with them. We went through this whole scenario I just described. They get it. And one guy stood up and said, this is for developers. That's why the ordinance was put in place. This is for the public good. No one should be opposed to this, and no one in the room was. So I think we've pushed the issue past the point of no return. We're okay. We should be able to get this project done. So with that, I'd answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the Appendix 9 request minus safety and security 6A.
I'll second that.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. So items withdrawn from consent. The first is PFM agreement.
Yeah, if we could just have a little more explanation on this. It's listed as no cost, but the filing fee on the bottom of the one page is $2,000, with PFM reserving the right to adjust annual fee and to request reimbursements of any out-of-pocket costs that will be incurred during the filing, disclosure reports, or notices.
The reason I put no cost adjustment for this particular contract is that this is already in force. It has been approved by the board in 15, and this is simply a name change. They're not changing their fee. That's an annual fee, and that's what they do this disclosure process for us every year with the SEC.
And what funding source does that come out of?
For this particular piece, that just comes out of general fund.
Move the approval of consent item
6.
6.
Second.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next is cooperative strategies agreement.
Yes, if we could just have a little bit more explanation on this one. And is the data based on having anything to do with boundaries, or if you could just give us a little more explanation on it?
So I'll take first shot at it. The cooperative strategies is actually DeYoung Richter. They just changed their name
I wondered about that.
our older board members that know as DeYoung Richter. But anyway, so we're in our 2-year cycle. The last time we did what we call a student potential analysis was in 2013. That's where your demographer comes in and they interview all the cities, the developers. They listen to all the rumors. They track down all the things that people are doing. And they try to really figure out where people are going to be building homes, how many homes, and the location of those homes, and in what sequence they're going to be building them in. That gives us a really good, firm idea. And it's not something we did the last time. We got this report in 17. That was simply a student projection, and there are 2 different types of analysis, okay? And sometimes our community gets confused over that particular piece, but we didn't do a student potential analysis the last time. We didn't track down the developers and that kind of thing. We just did our typical enrollment projection. So this does a more in-depth study, and we really felt that it would be what you need in order for you to have a vigorous boundary conversation, because you'll know, hopefully, given this information, a lot more about where students are going to be living, right, eventually. And so we wanted this to coincide with your boundary discussion this coming winter, spring time frame. And then we're going to do then our typical 2-year enrollment projection after we get our certified enrollment in 18 for fiscal year 19, and you'll get that by December 1st. So you'll have our student enrollment projection, and that'll be then consistent with the boundaries that you set prior to that. So we'll be able to populate those boundaries with your demographer will be able to pull into that discussion what those new boundaries will look like, and be able to give you a building by building population projection, and we'll move that out for 10 years. So this is kind of a sequential event for us, and we thought that the timing was appropriate given your desire for the discussions and the things you need to make as far as decisions here coming up.
Mm-hmm. Did you say, just maybe I missed it, when that enrollment or the projection report would be done based on the new boundaries that we...
We need to get our, the best information is if we wait until we get our October 1, 2018 certified head count. They'll use that to make their projections from, and they'll give you a report by December 1st of 18.
Okay, so we would get both reports in the same year.
Yes, correct.
Are both included in this?
No, this is only the student potential, and then I'll come back to you later when we've had more of a discussion on what you want to see in that student projection. I kind of wanted to wait until you got the boundaries set, so it was more, so we had more realistic information to give them. Right now, I wouldn't know what to tell them to do.
Sure.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense.
But this one does go out and shakes the bushes and does all those things and looks at census data for childbearing.
all that. Well, the whole childbearing thing is in your student projection type of, but this one will take future plans for subdivisions and try and determine what the density of student enrollment will be in those subdivisions and give you a student potential analysis.
Will it look at the age of the people in that subdivision? Because it's a big difference to us if it's a retirement home or if it's 18 to 28-year-olds.
The type of housing that's going in there, absolutely.
All right.
Yep.
We approve consent agenda item B7.
Second it.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you.
Yes, and on B8, if we could just have a little more clarification on this, Dwayne, exactly, City High's got a lot of different age roofs and everything like that. Can you let us know where this is?
Yeah, actually, this was work done by the roofing abatement contractor, but it was not on the roof. It was work inside the building. Okay. And there's a third floor family and consumer science room at City High. And if you've been up there, there's also 3 additional steps, or maybe even 4, into that classroom. It's not ADA friendly at all. We had a request to do so by a patron, and we met him out there, and he made a reasonable request. And so this past summer, we did a project where we put a chairlift in. There was some abatement work done there, but also, and there was a contractor who was trying to speed the schedule up a little bit and remove some material that had asbestos in it. We stopped him, and we asked our abatement contractor to remove it and dispose of it properly. I do expect that the district will be reimbursed this $7,000 for this project. A lot of this work was done over the weekend. It was done when students weren't in the building. The students were exposed to it. We did all the proper tests in the air filter, the air test. So just in full disclosure, this particular change may not have had to occur if they had done it the right way, but they didn't. We corrected it. We're going to go back on the contractor.
So if I'm to interpret this, that we had some acceleration that ended up costing us more.
And, well, it's going to cost the contractor more. He's going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it. But I want to make sure the asbestos abatement got paid.
We all do. Yeah. We all do. Move that we approve consent agenda item B8.
Second.
Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Okay, agenda setting. We talked about the November 20th board retreat, repurposing that as a work session around the accelerated plan. Dwayne's going to attend and bring some additional information. Is there anything else that we'd want to cover in that session, or just devote it to accelerated FMP?
I think one conversation we need to start having ASAP, both for acceleration and for meeting our aspirational goal to get our FRL down to 50%, is to talk about boundaries. I think the sooner we start talking about boundaries, the better, which is also going to obviously involve a lot of community input. We want to give folks a chance to weigh in. So I don't know when that is, but we, again, don't want to take up all that retreat time, but also don't want to add a bunch of work sessions all the time as well. But I'll just put that out there.
I would support putting that on simply because one of the things that Amy and I have as a task in front of us is working with the new attendance areas that will serve the new elementary school.
Yeah.
We have a lot of parental and community interest in getting those defined as quickly as possible. So I would suggest that even a short discussion on it on Monday night would help set us in the right direction so that we can begin advertising what we're going to do, because I think that'll go a long way with the community.
Okay, good, that's good. So 2 topics, accelerated F&P and beginning boundary discussion.
Well, I don't know how much time it would take, but I would really like us to get the Ed Committee scheduled and up and going. And I don't know if that's something that we could block off 10, 15 minutes, just have a discussion on that and get that going, because the longer we put it off, we're just not starting it, and we need to have those discussions.
Yeah, you're right, Phil.
Good.
So need to make some movement in the legal counsel arena. So I don't know if we want to choose another one of the dates that we had set aside to cover some of these additional things. We also, if we're going to do it, the window is closing for discussion of budget. So we need to get that going, or else we'll just proceed with the plan that we've used in the past, which didn't involve a lot of board involvement at this stage. So.
And maybe some of this is, we put it there and then we discuss when we might get, because we have 2 retreats scheduled next week and we have other time. So maybe we can, the acceleration is going to take time. Boundaries obviously is going to take a lot of time. And then we can see how much time is going to be needed for the legal question and for the, get Ed Committee just getting it scheduled, set up. So that's.
Do we want to do a work session after the next board meeting, or do we want to choose another night to cover some of these other things, or we want to put them off till December?
Why don't we use some of our time on Monday to make sure we've got a nice running list of topics that we need to cover and start thinking about how we cover them, whether it's work sessions or using some of our set-aside board retreat time. But it's sort of our backlog of issues and make sure we get to them in a timely way. But I'm with you on budget. The council matter, we do need to get solved. We owe it to Joe to get an item back on an upcoming agenda to close the loop on that.
Looking at your agenda on the 28th, you may want to put a hold on there for a work session following that. And as we proceed through and get that agenda set, I think that there may be enough time, maybe at least to tackle one issue on the 28th.
Sounds good.
Folks open to that? So what about the agenda on the 28th? I heard from P&G that we've got Appendix 7.
Yep, we need approval of Appendix 7.
Obviously, the F&P acceleration item following our work session next Monday. Other topics that we should put on the agenda?
I don't know if we could just have a brief update on I know our students are going to be back, and if we could just have some kind of update on if there's any benefit to that. I don't know if they take long, just to kind of, for the board members that weren't here, what we went through, what we discussed, and that type of a thing, and just have a brief presentation. I always think when the kids come here and they make an articulate argument for their stands, that we should recognize it. And if we just had a brief.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Started
So,
as soon as they stood up tonight.
Right. Well, I don't think it'd take a lot of time. I know I put on the agenda a while back a discussion on our asset sales disbursement agreement, that type of thing.
We have that on there.
Oh, for the next meeting?
Yes.
I apologize. Okay, thank you.
And there's also an extra one on there. Diane said she does not need to talk about program of studies again. Inadvertently, I obviously put it on both agendas, not knowing when it would be ready to go. That would be our error, so that one will be pulled.
In the interest of time, the annual grounds maintenance report, is that something that we could push off?
Certainly.
Well, okay, let's not go too far with it, and we need to make sure that we had a problem with the last one, the numbers not matching up to the year before.
As we talked before, we revamped the whole report. It's a pretty extensive report, and I think you'll find it very informative.
Okay, and it's standardized going from.
Yep.
Okay, just so we have that. That's fantastic.
And it'd be fine if we wanted to do it on the first board meeting in December. I'm sure Ben wouldn't mind a little extra time. So.
And we is it available now? So I get a little.
It's
bit
in
more
draft form only right this minute, so it's not available yet.
Okay, well, as soon as it would be available, just so I'd have a little more time to digest it, I'd appreciate that too. Thanks.
So let's agree to move that to the next meeting in December, knowing that we've got a work session on the 28th. Push that one out since that feels okay.
Okay, I'm going to push the envelope here. Summer facility use, is that something we need to discuss right away, or can we
The
put
sooner
that?
the better. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah.
Just trying to make sure we reserve enough time to be able to have a full work session on the 28th. So.
Okay, right. Well, but whether it's the 28th or sometime, I think we need to have that.
Oh, so you're saying it would be okay to move it?
It would be, yeah, just so as long as it's kind of in the hopper that we're bringing it up sooner than later, because there's community members that want to discuss that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, are we settled on agenda? Good.
Can I make sure we're all on the same page? I know a while back we were putting placeholders in to have retreats and work sessions, and we did put time placeholders in Monday and Tuesday. We've got an agenda for something on Monday. Are we or are we not doing something on Tuesday? If we're going to put a work session on the 28th, my inclination would be to not do something next Tuesday, but I want to make sure that we're all having the same expectation.
We didn't draft an agenda for Tuesday.
That's why I'm bringing it up now, because we can't decide at the end of our work session on Monday to say, hey, let's meet again tomorrow, because that's too late.
That's right. And likewise, I think we've eliminated the 27th and the 29th.
Fair enough.
Okay.
We don't have it for agenda setting, but for the next policy and governance meeting, I was wondering if you could take a look at that policy that was mentioned by a community commenter, the Appendix 4, Code 443.
It's not our appendix, so I'd have to do some research on that because that's not Appendix 4 for board policies.
Okay.
I can look into that and
So
find
maybe
out
for
what
a future agenda?
Appendix 4 that might be related to, and then if it's applicable, I could certainly forward it to P&G for consideration.
Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. There needs to be a motion.
We adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We're, no meeting Tuesday.
Get your pen out. It means that you will have to sign boxes.
This pile?
I need several autographs. Welcome to the right of the